And I see, Sylvia, correct me if I'm wrong, I see we have AISD representatives also.
Yes, David Knapp is with AISD.
And do we have any, just to refresh my memory, do we have any other items tonight where third-party non-residents would be
Item
attending?
item number six, and item number 7.
6 and 7. Okay, Dan.
Mr. Ross is also looks like he's on.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's it. I just want to make sure that for those two that maybe we get to those. They're high enough up that I think we'll get to them quickly. Okay, it is 6:02 p.m. calling to session regular city council meeting for the city of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. And for everybody who is joining us, and I'm going to use myself as an example, I do not open the chat feature. So if you are in the chat feature, I don't see it. And I don't have the web view open. So anybody who's on camera, I don't see you. So if you're waving, I won't see you. And so it's important that if people want to be in queue to be heard, that you use the hand option. So raise your hand, and then I will, depending on where we're at in the meeting, I will acknowledge you so that you can speak. And when you do speak, for the same reasons, because we may be able to see your name, there are some people that attend these meetings purely by phone, which means they don't see anything that's on the webcam. They also don't see the names. So when you do speak, if you would please introduce yourself, and if you're a resident, please indicate your address, and if you're representing a third party, just indicate who you're representing. And with that, we are at citizen and public communication. So if there are any residents who want to speak now because they won't be here during later items, or if anybody wants to speak to an item that is not on the agenda this evening, if you would please raise your hand. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of the torch, and from Doug Young of 30 years to Roxanne, our new city attorney, and I just wanted to not go unnoted that we had someone work for us for 30 years, and I certainly hope that we do something about that. But since I didn't hear anything about that happening, I at least wanted to note that. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak during citizen or public communication? And on the note of the chat feature, for anybody who is using the computer version, the chat, if you are having any technical issues, that's really the only reason that the chat feature should be used, and that would be to get a hold of a staff member to let them know if you're having any sort of technical issue with the meeting. That brings us to our reports for this evening. And so I will let Sylvia take over. And Sylvia, you are muted just in case you're speaking.
I was talking. I said I'll start with the administrative report. Carolyn is on. She'll do the public works report. She's also helping with the chat feature because we do have a lot of folks on today. And Chief Carter is also on. He'll do the public works section.
Great. And actually, now that you noted that, even though I just mentioned it, really to emphasize to everybody who's in the meeting, please refrain from using the chat to chat with each other or to chat about what's going on in the meeting. It's not appropriate, but more importantly, it's a huge distraction to our staff members who are already trying to do multiple things and be attentive to be responsive to questions. Sylvia, can you make the screen any larger or zoom in a little bit? Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, council information requests at the time of this particular printing, there were none. However, we've put out a few information requests, mostly related to information that we have residents bringing up, whether it's projects around the area, complaints, concerns, or just overall city information. I've shared all of those with the council over the last several weeks. I don't have them compiled here, but I can compile them in a much more neater format and throw them up on the web as well. Obviously, we continue COVID-19, not just watching, but we're still monitoring the numbers. The mayor and I and the chief still have sit rep with Travis County. And at this point is really on the reopening and making sure that we're watching the cases, and as the caseloads increase. Walter Jenkins, a local resident, also does a very good job of putting a chart together to show new cases that's in line with our COVID dashboard that's tied to Travis County and shows the number of cases and the hot spots in the area. We are continuing budget worksheet preparation. We are going to meet with the Budget and Finance Committee this Thursday. And while the process is tweaked a little bit, we're trying our darndest to keep everything looking and feeling the same as what the committee has been accustomed to seeing. Staff's going to take the onus on with OpenGov, and we're going to continue that process through the committees and work through the OpenGov process. And as committees and the staff and the committee members get more comfortable with it, we'll be opening up more and more portals. Obviously, our staff health and safety remains a high priority. We do not have any urgent need for PPE at this particular point. Luckily, our staff who was potentially ill has not been ill. Our latest was our staff accountant who had to quarantine for a few days after potential exposure. She is back at work, so we're happy to have her back. We did have a resident information request regarding Restrive, and I do see Mr. Litchfield on. I'm not sure if he'll want to comment too, but I'll go through the information that's been provided. We still continue to have OpenGov meetings as we transition into the other tools that it has, specifically workforce management, which will allow us to be able to, as we start talking about ramping up projects and services, any impacts to staff will be immediately available into the budget. And those are loaded staff hours, which include salaries, benefits, anything that's associated with staff pay will be able to be reviewed and analyzed pretty quickly. We did have a zoning commission meeting regarding the Stearns Lanes property. That item was tabled to some point in the future. There is no definite date at this point because we are requiring some information from the applicant from TxDOT. So the applicant is also at the mercy of TxDOT. There is an upcoming replat request on Stearns Lane that the property owner has initiated, and that's expected to be in front of council in the July meeting timeframe. Obviously, we continue budget planning for revenue losses. And now, not just in the current fiscal year, but budget planning for what those reduction of revenues look like in the future year. And that includes also understanding where our hotel is and what our retailers are doing. So we're still in communication. It's nice to see things opening up. How much, how little, and how often all remains to be seen. Again, we're going to talk about resiliency planning for future events, not just within the budget, but also within the staffing. And that means external contracts, cross-training, more generalists among the staff, as opposed to some of the silos and specialties that were here before. And then again, we kick off the budget process. So I'm going to jump into the staff report on Reese, and I'm going to keep it at a very high level because it is an ongoing item that we continue to work with the resident. So we had some allegations of animal care concerns, potential animal cruelty. Police responded twice, and staff also responded, and staff and police both found all of the animals to be in good care. There was vet records and vet information provided, so staff is satisfied that the animals are being taken care of. There was also a reported brush pile that is a violation of the code, accumulation of stagnant water. We have been in contact with the resident to cure the violation, and there are plans in progress to do that. Of particular interest to folks was the zoning violation. That's because a accessory use cannot be on the property without a primary use, and the animals are an accessory use. The resident is in the process of combining those two properties, and so they've also been given notice to cure and are working toward that goal. As with all code enforcement, the goal is compliance, not necessarily penalties. So that's where we are with that. I'll open it to any questions or allow Carolyn and the chief to go forward. Mayor, up to you.
Thank you. Why don't we, since you went through a lot there, let's see, are there any council questions to the administrative report that Sylvia just provided? Councilmember Rosengarten?
I'm going to take this opportunity within the admin report to direct staff to bring back the criteria for mitigation and impact fees at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else, any other council members who want to comment on the administrative portion of the staff report? Carolyn, could you proceed and do the Public Works report for us this evening?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to highlight a few things in the Public Works report. We will be doing the annual hydrant testing that should be upcoming, as well as the testing of the city-owned backflow devices. So those are some things that will be happening around the city in the next few days, basically, and weeks. We're also about ready to proceed with Valley Creek Park erosion control project. We have those documents all completed now, and the Golden Cheek Warbler survey should be done within the next 2 weeks and submit it, and we'll see if we've had any Golden Cheeks at the Gaines Greenbelt. We have been helping and working with Home Depot this last week. They had a pretty nice water leak, helping them to isolate where that was on their property. And if there's any questions at the end or after Chief, I'll be happy to answer those.
Carolyn, the Home Depot water leak, was that something that they discovered or is it something that we discovered?
They discovered it. It was at the rear of their property, kind of back, yeah, at the very back of their property. They were having a hard time getting all of their water off and isolate it. So we were just helping them with kind of that kind of coordination of getting the water turned off so that they could repair the leak. But yeah, since they've repaired that, and it also came up that they needed to install a backflow device on their irrigation line, and they were installing that today. So it should all be done very soon.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Rosengarten?
Both Wanda and I are aware of the Home Depot water leak and have investigated it. Wanted to know, is all of the expense of that on Home Depot? Is any of that within Sunset Valley's jurisdiction?
No, this expense, excuse me, the expense for the repair is all on the Home Depot. It was all on the customer side of the meter. It wasn't on any of the city side of the meter.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the Public Works report this evening? Chief Carter, would you please give us the public safety report? Chief.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. This report was written before some of the protest activity and turmoil downtown occurred. So real quick, I'd like to brief everybody about where we stand here in Sunset Valley as far as some of that activity, and then I'll get into my report. As of yet, we haven't had any reports of any incidents here within the city. There has been an increase of graffiti related to the protest up and down Westgate near Jones Road. so near our city. And then last night, the department received a credible threat about plans to loot one of the stores here in Sunset Valley. That has been going on at some of the stores around Austin. We got that information last night. We called on Austin PD and Travis County to kind of supplement our officers in the shopping areas. We got several police units to come and stand by with us pretty much throughout the night, and we're going to be doing that really until till the disturbances subside, because I mean, these have been kind of kicking off every evening all around the city. So if you see lots of Austin PD units in the shopping areas in the evening, or Travis County Sheriff's deputies, we've asked them to come and help us out and supplement our officers until this is over with. And then as far as the report, we do want to ask, or just put it out there, that we've had a lot of people going into the Greenbelt and on our trails with motorized vehicles. I want to remind residents to please, if you see that, give us a call. These, for the most part, it hasn't been Sunset Valley residents. There have been some Sunset Valley residents, but a lot of more people have noticed the trails in Greenbelt, and they may or may not be familiar with the laws and rules regarding use of it. So if you give us a call, doesn't mean we'll necessarily go out and write tickets, but we're trying to keep people aware that there are rules for the trails in this area. In addition, we've had an increase sort of related to that of people just not understanding leash laws in the city. Lots of complaints about people violating the leash laws, being in areas where dogs are supposed to be restrained. So if you see that, please don't confront the person. Just give us a call. We're not going out there again with our ticket books in our hand as a first response. We're just trying to educate people about it. So don't hesitate to let us know if you see that. And then finally, I wanted to go over the I think that was it. Yeah, the leash laws, that was the last thing I wanted to cover.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Rosengarten.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The first one before I go into public safety was Public Works. I want to see the lift station. So I want it noted right now in Public Works report that I'd like to have an opportunity to go look at the lift station. And I know that a couple of other council members would like to go. So please put this on your agenda, whoever's involved with the lift station, that we would like to have a time to go look at it. Thank you. And then regarding public safety, I apologize to everybody. I missed a public safety meeting last night. Totally spazzed while I was doing my own policing. So sorry, Chief, and thank you.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, I did have one more item. Because we are getting complaints about people not wearing masks. And that's another thing I want to remind everybody, that you're not required to wear a mask. It is a recommendation. However, the businesses here in Sunset Valley can require you to wear a mask inside of their premises. And that's where we're getting the calls. We have customers that don't want to wear one, and then the store will call us. We're treating that as a trespass. If the store's asking you to leave, we come and we just advise you that you have to leave the store. We've had complaints because I think people believe that we're enforcing the mask recommendations, and we're not. We're just going by the trust. The store would like the person to leave the premises, and we're just assisting them off the premises. So if you see someone without a mask, or someone calls on you and you're not wearing a mask, it's not required, but it is recommended that you wear one.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the police department. I was I really wasn't aware that some of my friends or some of our friends who live up by Mueller have moved out of their houses because they don't feel safe over there. And because they're close to, the target over there and some of the things happening. And I was just really grateful that we were close to 2 targets, but that I do feel really safe and even able to welcome people to my home if they need a place to stay in my friend group because I do have such confidence in our police department. So I really wanted to thank Chief and the police department for the security that they provide for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, do we have any other questions or comments from council on any of the 3 admin reports? The only item that I'm not really sure if it falls within the admin report or the public safety report, but we did have, I'm not sure exactly where the impetus for it was, but I know that Mayor Adler and Council Member Kitchen were trying to push through the implementation of showers that would be set up at Burger Stadium throughout the rest of the summer for the homeless population to come in and be able to shower there. And I was asked to approve this, to see if there's a way that I could approve it under the emergency COVID order. I instead indicated that if I was asked to do that, it would be a denial, and that instead, if they wanted to truly have this come into the city, that they would have to bring it before our residents and council for deliberation. They then pulled the application. They chose not to move forward with the application, although I did have a friendly conversation with Mayor Adler and a more heated conversation with Councilmember Kitchen. I believe Sylvia may have had contact with both the city manager and the assistant city manager. It's very clear that City of Austin was pushing to get this done as quietly as possible. So for any of our residents who follow City of Austin or who follow this particular issue, if this were to come before council, especially based on everything the chief just briefed, I do believe that this would be a very bad idea for our city. I think it would make the chief and our police department's job even harder. When I checked with the Montessori school, they had not been asked, nor did City of Austin realize that they are resuming regular school hours for 3 of their classrooms starting tomorrow. We also have when I contacted Leal Anderson, who is our athletic director for Burger Stadium, although the head people at AISD had greenlit this idea, Leal had not been contacted. And I don't think that City of Austin was recognizing that even though the school district is closed, Burger Stadium will have children and parents there soon for all of their UIL events. So both band and sporting events will be resuming during the summer. As you all know, we also still have our farmers market on Saturday, and on the other side of Burger Stadium, we have the drive-through COVID center. So for me, this was a pretty big offense that City of Austin would just assume that this was a good location and not really do their homework. I'm also not sure what the cost of this would be to taxpayers. And so I think that would also be an important thing for all of us to look into before we would approve something like this. But for now, it looks as if they've pulled the application. And of course, if it were to come back, I would resume the same position, which is that it has to go before council for deliberation and a vote. Is there anything else for admin reports this evening? Councilmember Rosengarten?
Thank you, Mayor, on what you just were talking about. I would vote no for that. And the reason being that I missed public safety meeting last night is because I was policing our building regarding the homeless situation and the damage they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to our next item for the mayor's dashboard, the only items that I would like for Sylvia to point out, if she would remind us when we will be receiving the April tax numbers for the retail.
That's going to be around the 5th of the month, Mayor.
Great, thank you. And would you do the same? I believe, I can't remember if you did this or if it was connected to something that got posted, but would you make sure that the council members get that information as soon as possible, if you could turn it around to the council?
Absolutely.
And council members, if you would look at or Sylvia, if you could pull up the agenda. And Councilmember Gonzalez, while she's doing that, I see your hand is up. Councilmember Gonzalez, did you have a question?
I do. I was trying to talk about during the administration some of the things I'd like to see come back.
Okay.
I would like a report on the status of the floodplain administration and how we're handling that right now. I just got a thing from the city of Austin on them adopting the Atlas 14, and I want to know how we're proceeding on that, and I'd like that to be done hopefully by the next meeting. I'd like to know what figures staff is using for the budgets that are coming out, and I'd like that as soon as possible. And I'd also like to know when people are being trained on OpenGov and if we're going to have people that we hired do the training at some point. That's my 3 questions.
Sylvia, do you want to respond to any of that or add to anything before I move to the next?
No, I'll work with Councilmember Gonzalez on the timeframes and send a report to the council.
For training, the one thing I would like is, since I kind of almost think all committee members, council members, and maybe even some residents want that, whatever training you put together, could you make it, I mean, I assume it'll be through some sort of a Zoom or virtual meeting. So anything we can do to publish that so that we have as many people attend it as possible.
Will do.
Councilmember Rosengarten, did you have another comment?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez, when you are asking staff for figures for budgets, what are you referring to? That's very open, and the rest of us would like to know what you're asking for.
And you're still on, your microphone's still on, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. There normally in April, the committees that comment on the budget, in my experience, like Public Works and perhaps Public Safety, go over what the staff presentation is for the next year. And that, and in my experience, or at least Public Works, that then goes to finance. And so I'm curious what assumptions are being projected for the decrease in the next year as staff puts together those numbers. And I just think that if we could all know that as soon as possible, that would be helpful. And then the number that I'm sort of interested in as soon as we hear from it, because I think the second of the month, last month, we had rough numbers from the state for sales tax drop, and I haven't seen them yet. And we almost exactly matched the state drop. So I'm very curious what the state is projecting, but I haven't seen it anywhere on the net yet to be able to comment. And so those are the numbers that I was talking about budget, Councilmember Rosengarten.
Do we have any other comments for the admin report? And Sylvia, if you would pull up the calendar, so the agenda planning, so we can talk about dates. We are now officially in our budget season. And when I say budget season, I mean this is the time when council, committees, and budget and finance were all starting to discuss what we would like to see in the next budget cycle. So in the budget that gets adopted later in the fall. This would be a very good time for especially council members to attend as many meetings as possible. The more that we are actually listening and participating in the conversations, the easier it will be once the budget comes to budget and finance. And as we all know, this will be a unique budget season for 2 reasons. One, we're now using OpenGov, but also with COVID, it's going to be a very different year in how we budget and approve things. With that, Sylvia, can you summarize for the hotel? So as we're talking about a percentage in reduction in the retail, that's different from the reduction in hot because it's not based on, it's based on whether they pay it or not.
Correct. So if you recall, or maybe you don't recall, our hotel did not pay their first quarter, even though Only one of those months was COVID related. Really only 8 days of that quarter were COVID related. So they didn't pay their first quarter. They've indicated they're not going to pay their second quarter and have indicated they are, their occupancy rate is very low and will struggle to pay any remainder. So internally, we are looking at what those revenue projections should or could be. Really in a worst case scenario, 0, and in a best case scenario, perhaps 20 to 25%. So there's the discussion on any potential hot fund items. Council will need to make a decision on how those are funded. And I continue to remind folks that rely on hot funds for expenses that the budget that was approved and the current budget that we're in made some assumptions, and those assumptions relied on revenues being received. And if we've not received those revenues, it makes the difficult task of deciding whether that expense moves forward and where does that expense come from.
For those of us who don't know, what is it when you say they're not paying for one quarter? What's an approximation of what a quarter equals?
I'll let Regine give you some specific numbers. Regine, let me unmute her.
Are you there?
Yes,
Yes,
we can
hear you.
Okay, so we get just a ballpark figure of about $60,000 a quarter.
Great, thank
which
you.
is 200, yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Council members, as we're looking to the calendar, again, my dashboard only shows called council meetings. The nice thing about OpenGov, the way we're posting the meetings now, is that it bundles all the meetings, which for me is nice. So if you go to the feedback page that we have, it shows you all of the current meetings that are called. And thank you, Sylvia. I can see you're trying to pull it up. Yeah. So if you go to this, the home page for our little interactive feedback, it's nice now because you can see all of the posted meetings. So again, you're going to start seeing budget and finance meetings called almost every week, if not every week. CED will be increasing their meetings over the next few weeks because of the marketing RFP. And on that note, so CED is wanting to do, as they go through the 11 RFPs that were submitted for a marketing firm, they are wanting to, prior to presentations, have council and the CED committee work together in a joint meeting to select the number and who we would like to see come back for presentations, which would also include adding parameters around anything we want to see during those presentations. As you can see on my dashboard, the proposed date would be Tuesday the 9th. We have had one request from a CED member that be called on Wednesday the 10th instead. And so I'm looking to see if there are any council members that have a strong preference for one of those 2 days. And Councilmember Gonzalez, I see that your hand is up. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Mayor, I have a lot of concern about this process because of the last time that we had a joint meeting with CED, where it ends up being, or how I experienced it as being the last time, was that it became an equally weighted process between CED and council. And I would much prefer to receive a recommendation from CED rather than have these conflated votes, which were very peculiar to me. And I don't understand why we're not just getting a recommendation from CED.
I hear you and I agree with some of that. I think the way that I plan to handle that differently here is that I do still want to have the joint meeting, but I am going, in the way we call the meeting, make it clear that although it's a joint meeting, the vote, the action portion of it will lie only with council. And so although there will be conversation, we won't do that same process of joint voting. They're going to hold 2 meetings the week before. And so what I will ask of Penny and Sylvia is that if they are going to do any voting, that they do it in those 2 meetings, and that the joint meeting is really to ensure that all the players that have information are in that meeting together. So that's maybe not a perfect fix to what you said, because I would still like to have the joint meeting, but I do agree that we will control the format and expectation and actually spell it out in the way the meeting is posted so that everybody comes in knowing what the ground rules are for that meeting.
I appreciate that, Mayor, because I found that a very disturbing process the last time. Thank you very much for addressing it.
Thank you. Another difference that will happen is that, and part of this is because there were so many applicants, since we had 11 that were responsive. Part of what the committee will be doing is not just recommending a top 3, they will be ranking all of them. So council will have that information also as they review. And council members, you should, Sylvia, am I correct? They've already been sent the Dropbox link so they can start on their own looking at all of the applicants?
No, Mayor, that'll happen after tonight's meeting. It'll happen later tonight. Matt just finished organizing all of the folders.
Great, thank you. Council members, to the question of Tuesday the 9th, I picked Tuesday the 9th just because that keeps it on a Tuesday, which is what council and residents are used to seeing for called meetings of the council. But we did have a CED member request Wednesday the 10th. Councilmember Medicus.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. The last time I looked this morning, the second meeting for CED was not posted. It was supposed to be Thursday night, but there's also finance on Thursday. I don't know if another meeting got scheduled.
They did. They moved the CED committee moved theirs to Friday to fix that conflict. And thank you to, I believe it was Zoe. I'm not sure she was the first one, but she's one of the ones I saw where she pointed out that we had that conflict. And it is definitely our intention to not schedule meetings at the same time, especially because once we get back to City Hall meetings, we only have one chamber that has the technology and audio-visual equipment. So that was an accident.
Well, so I think Zoe's on P&E, and that was a conflict with finance on Thursday. And I think they're still working on rescheduling that one. But CED was supposed to meet twice, I believe, Wednesday and Thursday.
They switched to Wednesday and
That's
Friday.
information looks like.
Councilmember Medicus, they switched to Wednesday and Friday.
Okay.
CED. That was how they resolved that one. And Sylvia, what was the fix for the finance and P&E?
Finance continues their meeting on Thursday, and I'll have to ask Carolyn about P&E.
If they found, Carolyn, do you know if we found a way to adjust that meeting so that people who want to attend both can?
Yes, I believe we're going to be meeting on Monday.
Okay, thanks. I just want to figure out when the meetings are so I can attend as many as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Council meetings last, and I'm going to call for Councilmember Ellett in a second. So council members, what I'm looking for right now is that if any of you have a preference between June 9th and June 10th. Councilmember Ellett?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, hi. For some reason, I thought the 12th was the date that been floated around. I mean, I don't mind whether it's the 9th or the 10th. That was the point number one. Point number two, to Council Member Gonzalez's point, yes, I think that would be a better way of presenting the data. I think, if anything, CED is trying to err on the side of inclusiveness. But if that's a better way of doing it, I support that, because I think the last time we did it was awkward and cumbersome. So I would support that format in the way that CED would base or present their recommendations after the evaluation. So I concur with that.
Thank you. Council members, last call, and then I'm going to go to other people who have their hands up. Is there any preference for council members between Tuesday the 9th and Wednesday the 10th? And Penny, you have the floor. It looks like you're self-muted, but you have the floor.
Oops, you are.
Hi.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Can I make a comment earlier? Melissa, we got feedback last go round that there were so many other things that people wanted included that we wanted to make it as transparent as possible. we are more than happy to come to council with our recommendations for presentations and a choice from that. That's easy. We were just trying to be open, inclusive, and transparent. So if you as council members would like, we can do it the other way. That's easy.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Penny. I appreciate the inclusiveness. My only concern was being addressed by the mayor, which was our voting process. And as long as we don't have a voting process, I'm happy for us to meet together and talk together and be able to dialogue in an open forum. So that sounds lovely, as long as it's not doing the strange voting process. That was my only concern.
Councilmember Rosengarten.
I was being flexible and allowing either the 9th or 10th. So whatever day is picked, I'm there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Charles, you have the floor.
Yes. Hello. Good evening.
Hi.
I wanted to bring up a topic on the sales revenue. When you went over this, I was a little late to the meeting. So when the sales revenue sheet was brought up, if it was brought up, it shows for the month of May, which is really represents March's sales revenue figures, right? Of a 20%, 25% reduction based upon the the expected budget arrangement. So just doing a little exercise in mathematics, it's not rocket science. Assuming that the first 3 weeks of March, which as we know came before the shelter-in-place order, otherwise known as medical martial law, assuming that we were on schedule and on budget in terms of expectations, if you do the math with the 25% reduction overall for that month, that makes the last week in March 0. That's 0%. That's 100% reduction. So, the rosy-eyed, rosy-colored glass-wearing people that claim that, we're out of the woods, that, it wasn't as bad as we thought. I mean, I say that we need to hang on a little longer, because just based upon the latest data we have, it's not looking good, folks. Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez, did you want to speak again, or did I just?
I did want to speak again, Mayor. I thought that there were some sort of irregularities to that number, and that when we sorted it out the last time, that we almost exactly tracked with the state at about 10, at about what was it, 10 or 12%? I don't remember what it was, but whatever the state was, that we were within a percentage of what the state did, and there were peculiarities in our numbers that were different than that. So I'd like clarification from staff on that, because I don't believe that 25% was accurate. I believe that we were, when everything washed out, that we were exactly at the same as the state, which I believe was in the 10% range.
Any other comments on any of our admin reports or planning? And council members, as we are in budget season, please, if there's anything that's important to you for the remainder of this fiscal year, as we approach budget season and then also an election season, things start moving really fast once we get to August. August to swearing in moves at lightning pace. So if there's anything that you want to legislate or that is important to you to get addressed this year, I strongly encourage you to get it onto one of the next 3 agendas. And I did happen to jump in the chat, and I saw that Terry Cowan had asked, is there a way to chat with people attending the meeting? And you may not have been in when I addressed this at the beginning of the meeting. The chat feature is only for technical questions. It is not meant to be a chat feature with people attending the meeting, in part because we have people attending by phone, and so it's not a very appropriate place for people to be chatting. And you can find a list of people if you're on the web version, but again, that list doesn't show people who are dialed in by phone only, and so it is not a comprehensive list of everybody who is attending the meeting. And that brings us to item number 4. Approve the minutes of May 19th for 2020. And Councilmember Reitz.
Before we move, Mayor, can I put an item on the agenda, please?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Rosengarten and I would like to sponsor an agenda item where we present several costing scenarios and to review for review in the Public Works and other areas. And I'm guessing it'll be probably the 7/7 meeting, unless Councilmember Rosengarten has a different idea.
Okay, and so what I just heard, so that I get a rough language, which I'll add during tonight's meeting, is an item co-sponsored by you and Councilmember Rosengarten for tentatively scheduled for 7/7 for a presentation of costing scenarios for Public Works and other areas. Did I get that right?
Public Works Services. Yes.
And is that presentation only or presentation and possible action?
And possible action.
Okay, and then from there, so that I'll just rough it out on the dashboard from there. It's up to you and Sylvia to get it baked the way you want it for that agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosengarten.
I am right there with Councilmember Reitz.
And I missed Councilmember Rosengarten. Were either you or Councilmember Reitz wanting to motion for item number 4?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let that to Councilmember Reitz.
Councilmember Reitz?
Yes, I would make a motion to approve item number 4.
Okay, and Councilmember Rosengarten, do you want to second it, or I'll move to one of the other council members that have their hands up?
I will second. Now, is this items on consent?
No, we are just doing, it doesn't look like, at least on my agenda, the approval item for consent is listed below number 4. So I was just going in order of the agenda. So the minutes were above the consent item. So the consent item will be next.
Okay.
This is just for the minutes. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any council members who want to add anything to that? Councilmember Medicus?
If you're asking if we want to add something to consent.
It's not, again, the consent item is number 5. We are on item number 4. Item number 4
Right.
is approval of the minutes. So the motion and the second is for approval of the minutes for the May 19th meeting. And so my call for questions is if there are any amendments or questions about that agenda. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Mayor, I had a question on the previous item and I couldn't get through with Councilmember Reitz and Rosengarten about what the plan was. So.
Okay, go ahead. You had a question about the item
Yes.
that they wanted to add?
Yes, what costing of Public Works meant and how this differs from our budget. Is this the year, is this the current year? Is it the year going forward? I just wanted to understand that, since it's, that which I liaison to.
Councilmember Rosengarten and Reitz, you both have hot mics. You can respond.
Right, so last council meeting, I presented a utility fund presentation, and Councilmember Rosengarten made several suggestions on various services that we offer now. They are now suspended, and so she made several suggestions, and we are firming those suggestions up into a proposal.
So that would be this year, not next year. Just trying to be clear.
Well, we're still working on all the details of it, so it's not ready for presentation this week.
No, but
So-
on this year's or next year's budget that you guys are working on. That's what I'm trying to understand.
It would be probably next year's budget.
It would be next year's budget.
Because it causes me concern that Public Works hasn't even gotten the data to be able to work on next year's budget, yet 2 other council members are doing that. I don't know, it just strange.
Well, it's just just a presentation, and if you don't agree with it, you don't have to vote for it. And it's a presentation, and we
Okay.
haven't even finalized the presentation yet. So
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council members, I'm going to ask for your vote now, and if you would please submit it through chat, and I will have the city administrator read the vote back to me, which is how I track it. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, item number 4, please submit your vote. Aye in favor, nay if you're not in favor. And Terry Cowan, I see you have a question. Who is RG? RG, if you're reading maybe an email from me, RG is Regine.
Mayor, Councilmember Ellett votes aye, Councilmember Reeds votes aye, Councilmember Medicus votes aye, Councilmember Rosengarten votes aye. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Looks like she's having some computer issues.
Yep, I see her audio off.
She's now picked up her phone.
Councilmember Gonzalez, all you have to do is do thumbs up if it's aye or thumbs down if it's nay.
She says aye, her system is not working.
Thank you. The vote passes unanimously, and we are now at council consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. And I will, while we're on this item, I'll see if maybe Councilmember Gonzalez gets back on. But in the meantime, we can at least see if we have a motion and get some items on before we take the vote. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Rosengarten?
I move to approve on agenda item number 6, AISD, number 7, Dan Ross, number 9, Open Meetings Act training.
We have a motion to approve on consent items number 6, 7, and 9. Is that correct, Councilmember Rosengarten?
That is correct.
And Councilmember Ellett, do you want to either second that to open it for discussion, or would you like to remove one of those items or add to that list? Councilmember Ellett.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would only like to remove one, and that would be number 6, because I got some
Number
questions
6.
that just need clarification.
Okay, so with removal of item number 6, would you like to be the second to approve on consent items number 7 and 9?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second to approve on consent items number 7 and 9. And this is where, Roxy, since you're new to how I usually do things, I usually don't explicitly ask you each time, but if you would please make a note, if we're going to approve something on consent that shouldn't, just interject and let us know that it's not eligible. Councilmember Medicus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remove item number 7.
Great, it's done. Item number 7 is removed. Now we have a motion to approve on consent item number 9. And so this would be another call to all of the council members, see if there's anything you would like to add or remove from that motion. I notice, Sylvia, item number 9 says that it's a presentation. And so typically we don't approve on consent something that is a presentation.
It has presentation and action.
And so Could you walk through what the proposed action is on that item so that everybody on the meeting can hear what that would be that we are approving on consent?
The proposed action was open meeting training for committee members as part of an ordinance amendment. Right now, the ordinance states committees must follow open meetings rules, and this would just add a layer of a training requirement to ensure we're all up to speed as we appoint new committees each year.
Thank you. And does anybody or any of our organizers, do we know if Melissa has made it back onto the call?
No.
Councilmember Gonzalez, can you hear us? I've unmuted the microphone that I have access to for you. Okay, council members, I'm going to call the vote. Please submit your vote via chat. All those in favor say aye. Sylvia, if you would please read the vote. And then all those opposed say nay. And if we would, yes.
Sorry, Councilmember Ellett, aye. Councilmember Rosengarten, aye. Councilmember Medicus, aye. Councilmember Reeds, aye. Councilmember Gonzalez, if you would please submit through the chat. I see your question right now.
Sylvia, is she in the meeting? Can she hear us? Is she participating at all?
I see her name. I see her microphone now turned on and hot. I just don't see her camera. I see her sending a chat message regarding her audio difficulty. Looks like she's coming back online. You see her camera is hot. I see her mic hot. Councilmember Gonzalez? We can't hear you. Your mic is green on our end, but you are hot. We can't hear you.
Councilmember Gonzalez, you could put your thumb up for aye, thumb down for nay.
She can't, she's not. Roxy, because we already have a quorum, can I call the vote? And we had 4 votes for it. Can I move on with the next item?
You can, because you have a quorum, but is there a way that she can call on the phone? Or
Councilmember Gonzalez, we can see you. Oh, okay, I see your hand. Oh, not anymore.
Roxy, so for this item, because I don't think she has participated in any of this, so even if she gets back on, she's not been able to participate in this particular item. Can I close out this item with the vote?
You can move on.
Okay, so for item number 5, we had 4 votes for, and then Regine, if you would just make sure that the record shows that Melissa had a technical difficulty that kept her from being able to join the meeting. That brings us now to item number 6, which unlike the consent item, I do know that Councilmember Gonzalez will want to be here for this one. And so we can wait a minute to see if she's able to get onto the meeting. And then definitely if we could get her to just call in, that would be acceptable. Dan, unrelated but related, since you're here this evening, which we don't usually get the benefit of having you, could you speak to us, since you're also unique, similar to the hotel, we don't get tax dollars that we can use to measure how much your business is suffering. Could you give us an idea of what changes you've seen in your revenue for March and April and May? And hold on, let me see if I can find your name here. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have me muted. Hi, I'm Dan Ross. I'm the owner of the Brody Homestead, AKA the Weaver Barn. And I'm here requesting that I get a refund of a mitigation fee that I paid in, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. And,
Hey, Dan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Before we get into your request, because we're still waiting for a council member to get logged back on, could you speak just to your revenue? Because we were talking about it earlier in terms of what we know about the hotel. And then, of course, with the rest of our commercial district, we can look at our tax payment for each month. You're an outlier because you don't pay we don't get to see how this has affected your business.
Well, let's see, we have postponed or canceled 35 to 40 events and that goes through, I think, the end of June. We haven't had an event at the Brody Homestead in probably 3 months. In addition, it has, obviously there's no, corporate events or not, corporations are not planning events generally. I mean, the barn is a place that has large gatherings and that has been prohibited.
Even though I'm sure it's not an exact measure, do you have a way similar to when we look at a percentage drop? So when we talk about a 10% drop, is the state average? What's your percentage drop?
95.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was looking for. So for you, it's been 95. For the hotel, it certainly has been at or above 80%, which is I mean, I don't know how you're making do. And then for residents who are on the call, Dan Ross is the owner and operator of the historic barn, which is known as the Brody Homestead Event Center. But for those of you who don't know, he's also what we would call a local owner. He's also the man who renovated the historic building. He also owns the homestead itself, which is the house next door. And right now, what is your tenant occupancy over there?
0.
And the last large tenant you had was Zales, is that right?
No, Samuel's Diamonds, and they went bankrupt last year and nationwide, and they had not made a payment in over a year. I mean, they're gone, and I have not been able to lease the property.
And so thank you, Dan. I'm now gonna mute your microphone and I'm gonna ask that Sylvia do a quick introduction to the actual item. I do hope that Councilmember Gonzalez can get back with us.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, we can hear you just in time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what you missed was we did vote on consent, just so you can know, and the only item that voted through on consent is item number 9, which is to
That's
require
lovely.
committees.
And I would have voted aye, but I just couldn't vote until I knew what you'd voted on. Thank you.
And then for Dan, we're on Dan Ross's item for the request for the Brody Homestead, but we hadn't started the item yet. Instead, he was just reviewing.
I've heard all
his
of that
effective
since
numbers.
then. I just couldn't get to the vote. That was all I had to do.
Mayor, are we going over item number?
Sylvia, you were muted. If you could do a summary of item number 7, Dan. And yes, I see that you were, I think, going to ask about item number 6, and I just inadvertently skipped over that. So Dan's in the room, but yes, let's go back to our actual proper agenda, which would be item number 6, which is the request by AISD for a variance to section 4.5 of the Land Development Code to vary the drainage criteria during improvements to Sunset Valley Elementary to allow for improved drainage and a reduction of flooding in the area of Jones Road and Reese Drive. And Sylvia, you have the floor. And so if you would give us an introduction and also help clarify for those of us who need to understand the way that they've requested the variance and how that applies both to this construction and other construction that they're doing on the property.
Thank you, Mayor. Austin ISD, and we have Mr. Knapp on the phone for any questions as I go over the item. We also have Travis on the line for any additional questions that may be related to the engineering. Basically, Jones Road sheds water and it causes issues to the drives along Jones Road. You're going to see an item later on at Sunset and Jones with similar issues. The school district is attempting to make improvements on site, meaning they want to handle the water that they shed all on site, and also mitigate for any water that's coming off of Jones with an amendment to their driveway. The variance that's requested tonight really doesn't have anything to do with the Jones Road section. In fact, it has more to do with the drainage standards that we follow, that follow the city of Austin, which allow for limited drainage design. So I'll let the engineers get into that. So at issue was the contractor starting work without a permit. And yes, that is correct. There is work that was started without a permit. It is not in the area that's related to the variance. They did have a stop work order issued today. I did speak with Mr. Knapp. It was a verbal. He contacted his contractor. So the work that's in the front, it would be part of a permit that would be issued irrelevant to the variance. The variance request just allows them to not do so much site disturbance. And I have we have the entire package, but the variance request really, as I'm showing on the screen at the bottom left hand of the corner, the bottom right hand of the corner is the actual driveway. The bottom left hand of the corner is where the variance request is addressing a particular tie-in. So the driveway is going to be redone, but it's going to be redone to our current standard. There is no variance that's requested for the driveway. Now at issue is that driveway will now have what we call a lip, or the layperson would call a lip, which helps the water follow the drainage where it's supposed to go into the inlets. And there was some concern that this could perhaps shed onto the property across the street. But all of those things are independent to the variance request that's here at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So essentially, they could tie in this light gray area in the middle of the screen are additional inlets that have been created so that their students are not in water, standing water, and again, so that water is not shedding off of the site. So I'm going to turn it over to Travis, and I want to turn it over to Mr. Knapp in case there's any specific questions that the council would like to ask. Mr. Knapp.
I want to address, hold on. Karen, I see that your hand is up. And I just wanted to make sure that maybe was from a past.
It was for recognizing item number 6 had been skipped. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. And then before we move to the next part of this presentation, just for the portion that Sylvia has done so far, do we have any council member questions for clarifications just on the portion that Sylvia has presented? Councilmember Ellett?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sylvia, thank you for following up on the stop work order. Just so we learn from this, so this doesn't happen again, how does it happen that someone starts work before the permit or before the variance is granted? How did that happen, so we can learn from that to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? I understand it's before your time, I think, but what can we take away from this?
First of all, we would better coordinate with the contractor. Unfortunately, contractor starting work is typically indicative of a couple of things. If they're in a hurry, and in this case, that's what we heard all along, even though this project has been in review and some modifications since really last summer. We finally got into some discussion in the early spring and finally got to resolution and submittal, which is what you see today. There was some question as to whether they even needed a variance. That does not negate the fact that they did need a permit before they started any work. And Mr. Knapp's on the call if you want to address that with him. But certainly from staff's perspective is ensuring everything is clear and no work is to commence without a permit.
Yeah, so if I may ask just a follow-on question to that, thank you for that clarification. Should the variance process have begun back in the summer then? Should they go in hand is what I'm saying, I guess.
Ideally, yes. From a timing perspective, we should have been having discussions on variance as we were going through design. But again, there was some question as to whether that variance could be granted administratively or whether that variance needed to come to the council. The engineer didn't have an issue with the design, but the process is still codified in the ordinance that it needs to come to the council.
Okay. And I have a question, but I'll wait. It's a question of Travis, so I'll wait until he's given his presentation. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Sylvia, my follow-up question is, and this is and if you don't know, I'm happy if any of the other people in the room, as part of the presentation night, would somebody please make sure that myself and council are aware if we are to delay in making a decision, how does that affect both health and safety, traffic? Because usually what typically happens with anything related to the school is that you're trying to get things done before you have students back in school. So if you would make sure that we're aware of that. Councilmember Gonzalez.
It's the other mic, Mayor.
Got it. Okay.
It's the other one. Can you?
Yes.
I'm having to come by phone.
Yes.
Are we good?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Mayor, the thing I'm confused out from the backup is that I would have voted for this, but I would have been voting for a different thing. I didn't see in the backup anywhere, and maybe it's there and I just didn't see it, that said this was on the back of the property. I thought this was all about the driveway, and then when Miriam put her thing in, then this part is. But so I'm concerned about our backup because I would have been voting for something different than I thought I was voting for. If this is on the back of the property, I would have gone and walked it ahead of time, but it wasn't clear to me that it was. And I'd like to understand, because of the flooding on the side of the property, how this is being resolved. And I don't have any clarity about that at all. So when Travis talks, I'd like to know where this is on the property, how it's connecting, and a lot of description about that, because I can't quite make it out from what I just got five or 10 minutes before the meeting started. So I'd like some clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Councilman Gonzalez, if it doesn't get answered, if you'll just do a follow-up question also once we get to that point. And Sylvia, what if council wants to, is there the ability to approve a portion of this and not the rest of it? How does that work tonight also?
So there are a couple of confusing things that have gone forward, and one of them is because there's an email that believes the driveway is part of the variance request. The driveway is not part of the variance request. The driveway is a standard driveway permit we would issue that meets commercial driveway standards. That has nothing to do with the driveway request. The contractor is prepared to move forward without the variance request. The problem is it just causes additional disturbance to the property, and it's just a messier process to go through. There's some trees here at the bottom of the screen. You can see my cursor. There's some trees that would be affected without receiving the variance. And so they're trying to avoid that, and they're trying to go sort of the shortest and best route available.
And so that's where my question ties in when the applicant and Travis speak, because it appears if you drive by the site that you all are trying to start doing this immediately, and that portions of it have already been started. And so if there's a portion of the project that we can approve tonight that's not connected to the variance, I would be looking to Sylvia, city attorney, and the applicant to tell us if that is both possible and or desired. And so with that, Sylvia, would you unmute the Travis and then anybody who is in the meeting from AISD?
So David Knapp is representing AISD, and Travis is self-muted. So Travis, if you would unmute yourself. So Travis, is there anything you'd like to add? Is there a different graphic you'd like me to bring up?
I think the graphic you have there is pretty good. Essentially, to kind of just echo what Sylvia has been talking about, the AISD is trying to alleviate some on-site local drainage concerns, and so they are adding some inlet capacity to their site that will then convey via pipe into the back of an existing inlet along Jones Road. So, Councilmember Gonzalez, to answer your question, this is along Jones Road, what I would consider the front of elementary school, and the variance at hand is really to address the issue of where the storm drain pipe that they are adding is tying into the back of the existing inlet along Jones Road that's owned and operated by Sunset Valley. And there's already a pipe penetration that's in the side of that inlet. This would be to either, I would like for them to tie into that. If field conditions allow, I would like for them to tie into that same location, but if field conditions don't allow, they can tie into the back of the inlet. So the variance is really just to allow for that tie-in, as opposed to tying their storm drain directly into the storm drain system out in Jones Road, the 72-inch storm drain underneath Jones Road. With that, I guess I'll ask Councilmember Gonzalez, does that answer your question that you had a few minutes ago? Or other council members?
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes, thank you, Travis. No, it doesn't. It's just because I'm confused, because I don't know if this is the entire site or if this is part of the site, because where the trees are reminds me of like where the playground is, and I can't really tell where the pipes are and where the connection is on the back of the property, because I don't see the word back anywhere in the backup. It looked to me everything was supposed to be right in the driveway. And so if you could just, and the worst flooding is to the side of the building. And so my fear here, I would have just put this on consent myself, but my concern now that we hear back of the property is there's a huge amount of flooding on the side of the property, standing water like for 5-7 days, mosquitoes for the kids, really concerned about that. I'm wondering if we're addressing this in that or if we're making it worse in that. And that's my concern and why I just didn't put this on consent, because I thought it was from the backup just right there by the driveway. But then I'm hearing it's in the back of the property, and I know that to the side of the property is a serious flood that's really a mess. So those are my questions and what I'm trying to understand.
Right, and then both for Travis and David to also help us understand this. The front of the property is the part that doesn't require a variance. The back of the property requires the variance, and I would add to Melissa's question, is it improving, making it worse? And if it's improving, is it improving it enough, since it's very clearly a known drainage issue, flood issue for both AISD and for the Montessori school? And you all have hot mics, so y'all can speak freely.
Okay, this is Travis again. The variance issue is along Jones Road, which I would call the front of the elementary school. The overall project addresses other issues throughout the site and various.
Wait, can you
different
stop
locations.
there, Travis? That
Yes.
conflicts. Sylvia, he just said that the variance is for the front and Jones. Is that correct?
That's right here where my, well, I'm calling it the back because see where my cursor is moving here? That's the pipe that would connect to what's here. That's what requires a variance. It's not that we're
Just
gonna.
want to make sure that when Travis says the front, again, that pipe that you just circled with your cursor going towards the back of the property, that's the variance that's required. Would you then also show us again with your cursor the other area that they're trying to do improvements?
So here's the inlet. Here's the box that requires a variance.
Right, now show us the portion that does not require variance.
It's not, well, all of this doesn't require a variance up here. There would be an additional tie-in that would have to come this way if we didn't grant the variance. So, and the trees are in the way. And I mean, I think you should let David describe it a little better.
Good evening. This is David Knapp. I'm with AISD. I appreciate the opportunity to help y'all hopefully clarify some things here. This is the front of the school. We are doing nothing at the back of the property. What gets confusing is we're going into the back of the inlet, which is on Jones Road. So it's that existing inlet right at the front of the school. And we already have as Travis mentioned, we already have one line that feeds into the side of that inlet. So, and we don't know about the elevations of that pipe, and it's undersized for what we're doing. That's an 8-inch line, and we are adding a 15-inch line. So, what the line that she is showing there is just taking the water from our front driveway. What you're seeing there, that little curved element, that's our front driveway. Everything to the north, you don't even see the footprint of the school there. The school is off the page to the north, so to speak. So the real dark section is when you first come into the campus off of Jones Road. It's that front kind of curved drive, and you come right up by the covered drop-off area. So that's the area that catches so much water and is challenging for parents and teachers and kids getting out and going into the school. So we are going to capture that water in that driveway in those 3 inlets, and then that will all feed to the front of the property into the back of that inlet on Jones Road. And I'd be happy to meet anyone out there and kind of walk it off and show you.
And
So,
can
David-
you answer the question of what's already been, even though it's not permitted yet, what's been started and what impact does this have on us as a community for traffic and for you as a school if we don't approve it tonight? And then how long do we have before the delay causes a more significant negative impact to all of us?
Okay. So, and I apologize, these are summer projects that we normally try and get done in a short time frame. So most of what we've done is really kind of demo work. And you see today that they did start tearing up some of the driveway. The next step would be to start, digging big holes. We're going to put these inlets in and start running pipe under there. As far as delay on the variance, hopefully we feel like, and I think Travis is, we're in agreement that this is a good solution for the school without an impact to the community and the people along Jones Road, sorry. We certainly, there's other portions of the project. We're doing mechanical replacement and we have a courtyard in the back that floods really badly. And so we're going to capture some of that water and bring it out to a parking lot. So we're doing some things like that to make the pathway for the kids a little drier and better on these rainy days. But there's things we can do. Our goal would be to proceed with this concept and hopefully get the variance. The variance gives us, like I said, we have a 15-inch line that we're bringing in. If there was an option not to do the variance if we use the 8-inch. Well, we can't use the 8-inch is obviously undersized. And so as an option, we would find a place to tie our line into that 8-inch and then convert the 8-inch into a 15-inch as it goes towards the inlet. So that's a little more involved, and we don't know exactly the flow lines of that 8-inch pipe. So we felt like this was a cleaner, better solution, and it probably gave us better control of the water.
And you've demoed, I assume, school. I mean, they maybe haven't announced it yet, but school, they're tentatively planning to have school start in August?
That's correct.
Okay. And so how long do you need to complete this project?
I believe they are, by contract, I think they have until August 3rd to complete everything. And Yeah, that includes.
Here's what I'm getting at. If you've already started tearing up a parking lot that's going to be needed when school starts, that's what I need council and myself to understand that. To what extent do we need to make a decision tonight, or by what date before it impacts how AISD is going to have to control traffic coming
Right.
in or out of the school come August?
So I guess we could essentially begin, at some point we'd be.
8 weeks doesn't feel like a very big window in terms of construction
No,
delays. So,
it really doesn't. And
okay. Okay, so with that, I see Councilmember Rosengarten. I know your hand has been up. You have the floor. Did you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple of them. First of all, for any council who are still confused, think of the bottom of your screen as Jones Road. So this is definitely all in the front of the elementary school. Mr. Knapp, all this work that you guys are proposing to do is going to be taking care of some flooding issues in the front of the elementary school, and then you hope to take care of some flooding in the back. Has it ever been brought to your attention that we as a city, because of all the backup and traffic on Jones Road, would prefer that you totally abandon this drop-off and pickup in front of the building and divert your drop-off and pickup behind the elementary building and the playground? You have good access all the way around the backside of the playground area for drop-off and pickup. Has that ever been brought to your attention?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
David, will you remind me, do you work for AISD or are you contracted to do just the construction for AISD?
I'm contracted. I'm a consultant as a construction manager. I'm not the contractor.
Thank you. So let's let David off the hook. That's not his job to know conceptual things between us and the school.
Got it.
Do we have any other, sorry, I see your hand is up, Melissa, and give me a second because I think I've unmuted you in one spot. Am I supposed to unmute you twice? Melissa, can you speak so I can see if you're...
Yes, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to confirm, is this in the front of the monument sign or in the back of the monument sign in the front? That's all I'm really curious about. There was just an email that said this was in the back of the building, and that's what threw me off, because I was all ready to take it on consent. I just want to know where it is, and as soon as I know that, I'm good to go.
Great, thank you. David or Travis?
Let's see, the monument sign is in that front.
Correct, it's the
island,
marquee. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're probably going. I think we're going around the monument sign essentially between our driveway and this line, and then you have that landscaped kind of area in front, and that's where the sign is, I believe. So,
Melissa, does that answer your question?
I think so. I think we're good. So that's fine. Thank you very much, Mayor. Just something peculiar said back, and that's when I got thrown for a loop. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmembers, do we have any additional questions for staff or for our construction manager or Travis? Any other council questions? Councilmember Ellett?
Thank you. I've got two questions actually for Travis. The first one is, Travis, what will be the impact of water flow? And I'm asking this because I think our residents would like to know this, that live along, and the organizations are also operating along Jones Road. What will be the impact of the water flow, west, east, north, south, whichever way you want to look at it, with this proposed work they're doing? What will be the change in the water flow on Jones Road?
With respect to the variance request, this only addresses their on-site local drainage, what I call local drainage, which is their on-site drainage. It's Sunset Valley Elementary's drainage. The variance request does not affect drainage along Jones Road. Now, there is an agenda item later here in the agenda for tonight where we're discussing some Jones Road drainage issues, and that I just don't want to cloud the issue that what AISD is doing is they're adding inlets on their site that tie into the back of an inlet that already exists along Jones Road, so it doesn't really affect Jones Road directly.
So we can tell the residents of Jones Road and the organization along Jones Road that whatever is proposed that AISD does here, it's not going to affect the water flow patterns along Jones Road. Is that correct?
Within the variance request, it is correct.
Okay, that kind of is
I'll
not
elaborate.
my question. Right? Yeah.
I'll elaborate on that. So they are also changing the driveway, and there is some concern that the driveway, they're redoing the driveway to establish it to a modern commercial type 2, what engineers refer to as a type 2 commercial driveway. When that is established, that driveway will have a rise in it, what Sylvia referred to as a lip. It'll have a rise in it. That rise is intended to duplicate the effect of a 6-inch tall curb. And right now that doesn't really exist. Runoff can come down Jones Road and over top the driveway and then get into the site. That's a situation that should not be occurring, but it does occur. And so this will reestablish what is more of a modern driveway or modern drainage driveway along Jones Road. There are some drainage concerns along Jones, and I've listened to residents cite those concerns, but that is actually a separate issue from what AISD is proposing, and that should be evaluated separately by council.
So your informed opinion here is whatever they're planning on doing or doing here at AISD is not going to change the water pattern along Jones Road. Is that correct?
Yes, the water pattern along Jones Road needs to be addressed separately by council.
Okay. And then one other point.
Travis,
Travis,
can I qualify that what Councilmember Ellett is asking you? Also, part of what I'm hearing you say is that any change that would happen related to that portion of the commercial driveway alteration, that doesn't require a variance, which means that's not, we're permitting that, but we don't really have control over, that's not connected to the variance.
That's correct. If they were proposing a new driveway, we would require them to build this type of driveway.
Thank you. That's a helpful point that you just made. Thank you.
Okay. And my final question for Travis then is, and I think I misunderstood this. Did I hear they're putting a 15-inch pipe into an 8-inch hole, for want of a better word here, or is that the other way around?
No, you're sort of correct. Right now, there's an 8-inch pipe going into the back of that inlet, going into the rear of that inlet. You can't really see it from the surface, but if you kind of peek down at that inlet, you could see that 8-inch pipe. The pipe that they're proposing is a 15-inch, and that is going to. I would like them to, if it's possible, once they excavate it and we can see what's actually out there in the field, if field conditions permit, I would like them to tie in, to tear off that 8-inch line right there at the intersection with the inlet and establish a new tie-in there with a 15-inch. That may not be possible with field conditions, and if it's not, I'm just asking that they just tie their 15-inch directly into the back side of that inlet.
And I know very little about plumbing or drainage, but is that wise to tie a 15-inch pipe into an 8-inch hole?
That's not what I meant that's not what I meant that come across. When I'm asking them if they can tie into, I'm just asking them to use the same tie-in location. Take the 8-inch out and tie a 15-inch into it instead, and then tie the existing 8 into the 15. And they would have to kind of just field engineer that the contractor would have to field engineer that tie-in.
Okay. So clarification, and so I can rest assured you, it's a 15-inch going into a 15-inch hole, no matter what.
No matter what.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Medicus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that this is the type of variance that council can approve versus going to Board of Adjustment or any other process.
That would be a question for Sylvia and Roxy.
Yes, this is a council variance request.
Councilmember Medicus, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, is Roxy with us?
Yes,
She
I'm
is.
here. I agree with Sylvia.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
And it's a little bit odd because this is a construction variance. This is a variance to construction standards, not a to an infrastructure standard, not a setback, not a building permit. This is our own Austin standard stuff that we have cobbled into our own ordinance that, quite frankly, the staff really felt like we should approve it internally.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rosengarten.
I move to approve this agenda item with the 5 findings.
We have a motion to approve, including the 5 findings as cited in the backup. Do we have a second? Councilmember Reitz.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. At this time, if there are any council members who have additional comments, if you would please raise your hand. Councilmember Medicus. Do you have any additional comments, Councilmember Medicus? Councilmember Rosengarten, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No.
And are there any comments or questions from anybody else in attendance this evening? If so, please raise your hand. Again, I don't have video feed turned on, so if you're waving, I don't see that. You have to actually use the digital option. Okay, council members, I will call for a vote now. If everybody would please submit your vote via chat. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Sylvia, if you would please read the vote back as you receive them.
Councilmember Ellett, yes. Councilmember Gonzalez, yes. Councilmember Medicus, yes. Councilmember Rosengarten, yes. Councilmember Reitz, yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We are now at item number 7, request by Brody Homestead for reevaluation of mitigation fee paid in 2008 with a potential refund to the payee in the amount of $61,470.11 with council deliberation and possible action. Sylvia, would you please start with a summary of this item?
Thank you, Mayor. So Brody Homestead paid $61,470.11 back in 2008 for mitigation and or potential negative impacts is the way the council action was written for watershed protection. They also paid an additional $2,025 for mitigation to a tree planting to a tree that had some root damage. Carolyn can go into that because we've since planted trees along Ernest Robles Way. The $61,470 was to be used for construction or planning or those kinds of things for mitigation. So at that point in time, the applicant paid the fee, the council approved the watershed development permit and the final site plan in 2012. So the applicant, since that period of time, we have not used any of that money. It is in a separate fund. The applicant is requesting a refund of those fees. And so the backup that I provided to the council describes the mitigation fee as to mitigate the impact to water quality. And there's some specific verbiage in the backup in the agenda items on how the item was discussed. So it looks and smells like an impact fee. The city attorney and I have been back and forth going over what is that impact fee. And then of course the question is, did we have authority to assess the impact fee? And it appears that no, we did not have authority to assess the impact fee. Second to that is even if we had an ordinance for an impact fee, is the applicant within his time frame to ask for a refund? And there are certain milestones within the ordinance itself. And again, I'm going to make the assumption that we did have an impact fee ordinance at the time that would have allowed us to assess the amount. So there are things that the city should have done. We have a 2-year service, and then we have facility expansion no later than 5 years. There's some specific language in the agenda item and in the site plan review that talked about facility expansion to deal with the water and the water quality. So there's also a period within 10 years the applicant can request the refund. So from the point in time that he paid it to now, he's within his 10-year period. We haven't done anything within the 2-year nor within the 5-year period that is stipulated in Chapter 395. So the applicant has requested the refund. Again, you heard him earlier. He's had some negative impacts to COVID, and the refund would allow his business to remain in operation. What I attached to the council item was the agenda on 7/24 and the council minutes on 7/24 that discussed some of the potential way to mitigate this particular development and some very strong feelings from the council. I also attached the local government code chapter 395. And again, on the assumption that 395 was in place and we did have the authority, the real estate center guidance on 395, which means we need to review it. There are certain timeframes in place where we are continually reviewing impact fees so that they're fair and equitable and assessed in the most reasonable way. So the development is truly only paying impacts that they are causing to any particular system, whether that's water, wastewater, drainage, quality, et cetera, et cetera. So in this particular case, staff is recommending approval of the refund to Mr. Dan Ross of Brody Homestead.
Sylvia, do you know what, so I've been here for this entire process. I didn't feel comfortable and I don't remember how the vote went down. And I actually don't remember if I was a council member or the mayor at the time, but I do remember not being comfortable with this fee being assessed, in part because I didn't completely understand how we were calculating it. And even at the time, it didn't seem like we had a clear path for how we were going to mobilize use of those funds to actually do something.
I've not been able to find information on how it was calculated, neither in the agenda item itself nor in the minutes. I do find, however, we talk about treatment capacity, and there's a lot of things within the agenda item that speak to a construction of something that would have occurred, but what that something is not clear. And if you go into the Texas A&M Research Center document that's in there, impact fees require capital improvement plans. They require your master plans to match. They require your comprehensive plans to match. None of those things seem to be apparent within this particular agenda item. And again, I have to make the assumption that we did have them and chapter 395 was in place, and he's within his ability within 395 to request a refund.
Also, Carolyn, I know that you're in the room and I'm not expecting you to have more information, but certainly jump in if you do have some, if somebody's saying something that you actually can elaborate or correct.
No problem. Yeah, I can. I mean, I do know that some of the numbers that they came up with was having to do with a variance approval that was back in 2008 that they were referencing, but it was calculated on a drainage area. It was calculated over some area, basically, that they came up with those numbers.
And then this would be a question for Roxy or Sylvia. At what point, or I've heard some questions from residents and have noticed in the public chat room that there are some questions of financial liability if we do give the money back. My concern is actually the opposite. It's what financial liability we have if we don't give it back. Because to me, it seems like we were sloppy in how we calculated and took in the money, and that we maybe didn't have the legislative tools in place to justify it. and then we sat on it for too long without a plan.
This is Roxy Stevens. I can address that if I may.
Yes, please.
The local government code, and I'm going to assume that we had the impact fee ordinance in place, et cetera. And even then, if that was the case, the statute is extremely clear that if we have not used those impact fees that were charged, and this one specifically for the water quality mitigation portion, that 61,000 plus portion, that it hadn't been done within those 5 years, the statute says that the municipality shall refund the impact fee. It isn't a may. It doesn't give any kind of discretion there. It says shall. And at that point, if the municipality does not refund the fees that have not been expended, then the statute further states that the owner of the property has the ability to file a lawsuit to seek a refund under that specific statute. So you're right. The statute's clear, and it says that we shall refund, especially when those monies have not been expended. And if we don't, then we would be subject to the property owner has the ability and the right under that same statute to file a lawsuit to seek refund.
Thank you. And then I have one last question before I hand it to council members. I also saw in the public comments there was a question about do we actually keep these monies separate? So my understanding, and this would be for Regine or Sylvia, it's not that it's in a separate account, but it has for many years. Councilmember Rosengarten could speak to this as well. We see it every year in our budget as a little a grouping. There's a handful of things where it's tucked away in a line item that is very specific to Dan and his site. And it's sort of this, it's a bucket of money that we don't touch each year in the budget.
Yes, it's in
Sylvia, if you have a better way to describe that.
It's in a quote unquote committed portion of the budget. I think earlier in the year and last year, and Regine can turn on her mic if she'd like to. There was a request. There's about another different section that has about $19,000 of various projects in it. Some as much as 10 and 15 years old that have just been sitting there. So there was a request by the accountant to the public works staff at some point to please tell me what this is for so that we can either use it or do whatever we need to do with it, the projects that were intended to pay or mitigate, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Councilmember Medicus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a point I'd like clarification on, because when I was trying to understand the difference between mitigation fees and impact fees, and there are different definitions for them. While mitigation fees are similar to impact fees, they differ in that their focus is on the environment. And the impact fees are changes to the new development that pay for the capital improvements. So I'm not clear on all the language that we have in here is about mitigation fee, yet the ordinances or the statutes that are being referred to are referring to impact fees. So I just want to get a legal opinion on, what are we really talking about here and what is the difference?
This is Roxy Stevens. I can answer that. I did look at that, and even though we use the term mitigation, when I looked at the purpose of the fee, which was to mitigate, it was basically to mitigate an impact that was seen, and I looked at the minutes and et cetera, and mitigate an impact to the environmental or the water quality issue that was going to be done by the actual land development. That fee was to cover and make up or create, something to mitigate that. So in that aspect, when I looked at it, and I looked at the what mitigation fee versus impact fee, and I looked under chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code, this particular fee that was related to the variance in the zoning or the land development code, and in the and used to mitigate an actual impact to the water quality issue, that falls under the statutory definition of an impact fee. And I also did case law. There's case law research, and I looked at these kinds of fact patterns, and there were cases that I found where even though it was called something like a mitigation fee or something else, it qualified under this statutory impact fee. I have those cases if you need me to send them to you.
Thank you, Roxy. In light of that, I would just hope anything we do moving forward that we're really clear and we define what we're talking about when we have these.
Yeah, Karen, if I may, the one of the first places I looked is what was initially considered when approving not only the site plan, but the development itself. And so there is what I have highlighted on the screen specifically talks about treatment capacity. It specifically talks about having to upsize. It specifically, and again, those are impacts. It looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. So anyway.
Yeah, Sylvia's right. That would go to what's called the facilities, the expansion of facilities that's under the statutory definition. And that all ties in and leads it to be an impact fee.
And this is a question for Carolyn, because you were here historically, or Sylvia, if you know from reviewing the documents. Was there any stormwater mitigation that was actually a part of the original development? And I assume yes.
Are you talking about the Homestead Shopping Center development, or
the original development agreement? Sorry, yes, sorry, Carolyn, yes, that's what I'm asking, is that in the original design development, didn't it already include the anticipation of Dan's property and Dan's development being in there? So wasn't the flood mitigation to some extent already calculated in the development?
I think that
Stormwater mitigation?
there was a certain amount of, there was enough capacity in the existing infrastructure of the Homestead property that could mitigate for what was happening with Dan's property. I think there was a question at that time about it being like almost to capacity, basically, is what I think it came down to.
So here's why I asked that question, and Roxy hasn't touched on this, but she might. In addition to us not having the correct structure in place to impose this and not calculating it correctly, and then not using it in a timely fashion, I also would believe that if Dan hired an attorney to look into this, we might discover that what we actually did was double mitigation, that we asked the original development to calculate in for stormwater mitigation, and then in addition to that, we asked him to pay a fee for the same thing. Councilmember Rosengarten?
Personally, I was against us doing this fee at the time, and I'm against us keeping the funds. So I am going to make a motion that we agree to refund this amount of money because we did not act in our time frame. And I know some people are wondering if we kept the funds separate from the general fund, and the answer is yes. That's why we know we have not spent that amount of money. So again, I move that we refund this amount. Thank you.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to open it for discussion? Councilmember Reitz, are you a second?
Yes, I will second. I do agree with Councilmember Rosengarten's reasoning.
I also agree. I didn't agree with us imposing it to begin with, and I'm very disappointed that we didn't work with him in a timely way to create a better use for it. Councilmember Ellett? Councilmember Ellett, did you want to make a comment?
I was going to second, but I think Wanda beat me to the buzzer, so I agree. I was going to second it, but Wanda beat me to it.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez? Councilmember Gonzalez?
She can't be heard again. She's trying to
I'm looking through my list to see if I have another.
Councilmember Gonzalez, it's asking for an audio pin. If you could enter pound 205 pound.
Pound 205 pound should allow you to be heard by us, Melissa, through your phone audio.
She's saying it's okay. She's not having any luck.
Okay, Councilmember Gonzalez, while you keep working on it, I'll go through the other individuals that have their hand raised and then try to circle back to you. Councilmember Medicus, did you want to make any comments?
Yes, I just had a question. So was this all part of allowing additional impervious cover? And I also want second part of that question is, does this open us up for other variances that we've done in any other impact fees or mitigation fees that the city has levied? So I'm just a bit concerned about that.
So I think Terry Cowan sent a request, and I asked Regine to review whatever mitigation, quote unquote, mitigation fees we have on the books right now. And it totals about $19,000 of what are unused funds. And that's the portion within the statute that's at question. Have we used it? Did we plan for it? And we're all making the assumption that Chapter 395 was in play. And yes, we had the authority to charge it. We would be, I believe, subject to about $19,000 of funds that we have off in a corner somewhere that would be responsible to be refunded. And not all of those are mitigation to water or anything. Some of those are tree mitigations. Some of those are leftover retainage that we probably should have given back on a particular project. So it's 19 on the books, but it may be something smaller than that. And I think that goes to the point that Councilmember Rosengarten raised earlier, that she's directing staff to go and research this and bring it forward if this is an ideal situation, if impact fees are something Sunset Valley wants to do. And to talk to the impervious cover, what they were doing had been already approved in 2008. So there's some time that had passed between the initial approval and then this approval, and then this approval was also contingent upon the fees being paid.
And Sylvia, that list of others that you're talking about, those range, which I had never seen that, or not, I hadn't seen the list presented in that way until the question was asked today. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects that range from 2005 to 2009. And the largest fee paid there was $5,000. So again, if I was the applicant in this situation, I'd be looking at the fee paid in this situation, and I just don't think it looks good that, you know, 60,000. So I don't know if Roxy or Sylvia have anything to note on that, but I was surprised to see the list and to see how, you know, how small those other numbers were that make up the 20,000 that's still on the books for other projects.
There was a mitigation fee that was proposed to be assessed to the barn, and as opposed to the fee, the barn chose to build their own infrastructure. And so typically that's what you'll see. That's why the statute really talks about construction, it talks about facilities, and it talks about a plan. Because ideally, the whole issue is I'm going to pay it because I'm having I'm having to either quote unquote mitigate something that I'm causing or could potentially cause, and or I need to deal with my impact into the system because development is supposed to be a partnership approach. And so if I'm having a detrimental impact or an impact that the system can't handle, I need to pay for my portion of it. And so the idea is cities have plans and comprehensive plans and master capital improvement plans that match those things, so that when we assess a fee, we have a plan on how we're going to use it, because we already know that this development either could potentially cause an issue or that we already have an issue within a certain area.
Councilmember Gonzalez, it looks like we now have a hot mic for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm done being visual today because it's just thrown everything off. So not that I don't want to be seen. I'm giving up. The question that I have, it comes to process. And it seems as if the problem was that we kept this in a separate account, because from what I'm reading, a lot of the things that we did past this are, there's some development to downstream that would have alleviated this, and the argument I'm hearing, and I want Roxy to weigh in on this, is that the money was kept separate, and if the money had been put in the general fund and we had done some of the things that we've improved downstream, that would have worked. Is that true, Roxy, or am I incorrect about that?
No, the impact fees or the mitigation fee that was paid has to be used for a specific purpose, and I don't believe that it can be commingled with the general fund. I think that it has to be earmarked in some way.
Right, but if we had used that money to say work on the dam downstream, because that would have mitigated the water, which is, and I know that's new for you because you don't, but that's further down, that would have been acceptable. It was more that the money was held apart. Is that correct?
No, well, it would have been acceptable if that would have been part of the conversation that was had at the time when the variance was accepted and the mitigation fee was assessed. That would have been tied to the mitigation of the impact that land development had on that specific site. So I can't generally answer that question, but if it was somehow correlated with the impact that development was having, that for which the fee was assessed or was contemplated, that possibly that could work. But at this point, I don't have the information to say, and I don't believe that would have worked.
Okay, it's just, I just want to fix is what I guess what I'm trying to as we move forward, right? I'm hearing everybody saying things. I want the fix to process as we move forward here, and so I'd like to be clear by the time that we finish this that we'll probably vote for it. But I still want to know how we're going to fix it, because it's not likely to be discussed again if we don't do the fix now. And I don't want this to come up again without knowing what we did wrong and what we need to do right. And so I'm not at all clear about what that is. I mean, I get that it was kept in a separate account, but I don't know how we would have fixed this.
In this particular,
before you give your answer,
money was not spent. Go ahead.
So in terms of fixing process, and this is where I'd like for Roxy and Sylvia to both weigh in, I think that we need to do a handful of things. We need to have a clear way, whether it's ordinance, legislation, we need to be clear about why we're taking the money and for what clear purpose that is specific. We then need to have a better, clear way of how we calculate the fee, because again, if I was an attorney that was actually representing Dan, I would say that this was an incredibly arbitrary impact fee. And not only was it inappropriate based on our policies and past impact fees, it was just completely arbitrary, in addition to us then not knowing how to keep the money, manage the money, or spend the money. So I think we need to fix every single one of those columns of process, which is how we take in the fee, how we calculate the fee, and then how we properly utilize the fee in combination with the developer being able to see in a transparent way how and why we took the money, and then how we spent it to match the justification for why it was paid. And Sylvia and Roxy, you like what if you had to give us a little laundry list of what are the things we do to fix that, to Councilmember Gonzalez's point, so that we don't end up having this happen again?
Well,
actually, it's outlined in Texas Local Government Code 395 on the process and what requirements we have to have. Like Sylvia was talking about earlier, there has to be a capital improvement plan, and there also has to be land use assumptions, both of which require public hearings. It's a long process, and it's a transparent process, and it requires several notifications, public hearings, things like that. And that's all outlined in the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 395. And I'd be happy. provide you with more specific, if you need that.
Roxy, if we discover, since I don't think it really came to question until tonight, if we discover that this actually was a part of the original development, meaning when the shopping center was developed, this mitigation, it had already accounted for, it was already implemented as part of the plan, which included Dan's property. He didn't come and acquire and plug his property in. It was part of the original development. Is it possible that we do actually owe him damages because the fee never should have been assessed to begin with?
I don't know the answer to that question because the statute, when I looked at the statute, I was looking at the use of the money and the refund, the request for the refund.
And if we award him a refund tonight, can he still pursue, if he wanted to, can he still pursue damages if he is able to determine, or if you're able to determine based on us asking tonight that it should have never been assessed to begin with?
The only issue right now is that he is requesting a refund. The statute says that we shall refund, and if we don't refund, then he could sue us for the refund. So in my opinion, if we issue him the refund of the unspent monies under that statute, under 395, then we would have already fulfilled our statutory duty under that.
Okay. Councilmember Rosengarten.
I was earlier put my hand up when Councilmember Gonzalez was talking, and she wanted to know if we could have used it for the dam, and the answer was no. The discussion was using it for the property and near the property of the barn to beautify that area. Thank you.
And Regine, I know that you wanted to speak, and then Councilmember Reach. Regine, we can hear you.
Oh, great. So I just wanted to mention about the where the funds are. The funds are in the general fund. They are committed funds. They show up in the audit as a committed fund in that amount, and so they weren't in a separate account, but they are designated as a committed fund and could not be spent on anything else except for a project that was on that property. Why a project didn't have, I don't know, but just to clarify that it has been, it's in the audit that way, and so it does show that it's been on the books that way since the beginning.
Point of order, Mayor.
Hold on, Councilmember Reitz. Yes, sorry, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Mayor, I guess my problem with the process is that, which I kind of got cut off on before, which is a problem for me with when I'm speaking sometimes, is that it feels to me as a council member, and this is no offense to Dan, that we have a city administrator and a mayor arguing a case against the city for a resident, in terms, or not a resident, but a business owner. And in terms of process, what it feels like to me is that his request should have come through, and it should have gone to the attorney, and then the attorney should have talked about the merits of it. And it just, I'm uncomfortable as a council member when it feels like the mayor and the city administrator are advocating for a position in a really hard way. And so I'm convinced that this should go through, but I'm just trying to figure out about process, and I'm concerned about our process, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And yes, to clarify that, because I also saw that in the questions, when we say that he requested this, let me be clear for the record. I contacted him as a business owner and said, tell me about what's going on based on COVID. Pretty much every time I've spoken to Dan over the last however many years, I have asked him, what should we do to right this? Because similar to Councilmember Rosengarten, I very clearly vocally thought that this was a completely arbitrary, capricious, and inappropriate fee to be charged against him. Therefore, I worked with him pretty much every year. I would call him a couple times a year and say, is there some way that we could actually implement this money to create the mitigation that we claimed to say we were going to do, but in a way that might actually benefit your property, benefit the dock's property, do something. And that's something that Carolyn and I had also discussed. Is there a way we could create a project where we actually do something on the property that's adjacent to him, where he can actually enjoy it himself, or that his guests could enjoy it, something where we are creating something that either increases beauty or use of that space. So you are correct that I am absolutely advocating for us to return this. In terms of the request being formal or informal, I'm the one sponsoring this item, and I'm sponsoring it based on all of those conversations. So I don't think it's that he's making a formal request. It's that I, as the mayor, chose to sponsor this item. And once I submitted it to admin and the city attorney, it became clear pretty quickly that this was an item that council needed to deliberate and allow Dan Ross to participate in that deliberation. Councilmember Reeds.
But yes, I just wanted to make a point in the budget process. I think we should add these type of projects to our capital improvement projects, our infrastructure projects with a line item that says from a committed fund. And that way we won't lose sight of them if there's personnel changes, et cetera. So.
I currently don't see any additional hands up. Are there any additional questions or comments? And then Roxy or Sylvia, is there anything else that you would want to add before we take a vote?
No, other than the applicant did submit a formal request. I did send that to Councilmember Gonzalez, and the city attorney and I have been in constant communication at the receipt of that request.
And so that, I did not actually realize that until you just mentioned that. So that request didn't, I don't even think that went to me. It must have gone directly to you.
I don't have anything further to add.
Helen, Bessie?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. And thank you for letting me have some input. I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Ross and what he's experiencing, as well as everyone in the city and in the United States and everywhere else. But I do have a couple of questions. I'm not the terms about the impact fee versus the mitigation fee. And of course, I don't know about those kinds of things. I just want to say that last year in November, City Council member of Austin, Leslie Poole, said that collecting a fee in lieu is a conventional approach that Austin has employed for decades. It's almost always cheaper than doing mitigation on site. And then she said that she noted that the fees that are collected rarely add up to the amount of money necessary to construct a large water quality treatment or detention facility. However, the approach does generate the necessary funds through other ones coming together, other mitigation fees, and that it has the advantage of allowing for infrastructure where the city has oversight to ensure continued quality, which in this case would have been the downstream dam. So it seems like this is being a bit crammed down the throats of council and residents, and I don't mean that as a terrible negative statement, but I would like to suggest that you table it for tonight and then continue to do some research, find out the history of mitigation fees from the city of Austin. We, in the past, the city of Sunset Valley, and we still do it, I'm quite sure, and our attorneys probably do it as well. We look to the city of Austin because they have the manpower, they have the attorneys to do the adequate research. For years before we had any sales tax revenue and relied only on property tax to run our city, we were totally dependent upon the input of other cities around us, mostly Austin. So I think it would be a good idea to maybe find out the history of mitigation fees, why they were, when they happened, which I'm guessing is in the 80s, late 80s, when all the development really started in the city of Austin and started in Sunset Valley, and see where those fees came from and understand the rationale behind them, and then go from there. And you can always get hung up on the literal letter of the law and say, oh, this isn't good. And But I really do resent that the city administration is taking such a strong stand when it's the council who's supposed to be making the decisions, and the administration and the mayor are supposed to be neutral. That's at least that's how the city used to be run. The mayor is neutral, the administrator is neutral, and it is the council who makes the decisions. Thank you.
Mayor, I would like to point out, I am as neutral as possible. My job is to bring the facts, lay out the facts, bring the history, and make a recommendation based on those facts. And that's what I have done. It is the council's decision to refund or not refund. We've stated the statute. We've even given a lot of reasonableness to the city as to maybe perhaps how it was charged or why it was charged. And there's a lot of history to this particular one, but to say I am for or against something, I am for or against what is written in the law.
Thank you. And I would like to add that in no way, shape, or form do I think your mayor is supposed to be neutral. Your mayor is supposed to be a good protector of the constituency and the city and to do what's best on behalf and also to help guide both residents, applicants, and other council members. The catch is I don't get to vote, and that's where my neutrality absolutely. Beyond my words, I have no power at the dais. What I see here is that we took a mitigation fee. We then assumed later that it was an impact fee, or although we didn't call it an impact fee. And now we're discussing, well, maybe we should have spent it on things that weren't even discussed with the developer at the time. And then to Helen's point, this is not a fee in lieu of. So that was referenced in terms of City of Austin doing fee in lieu of. That's not what this was. And so similar to taking a fee, not calling it an impact fee, and then years later saying, well, we should have had an impact fee ordinance or legislation. This is not a fee in lieu of. And in City of Austin, oftentimes those fee in lieu of are given back to the developer. So going back to one of Roxy's points, there's a reason that within these ordinances, it says if the money isn't utilized, it shall be refunded to the developer. And Dan, do you still want to speak? You are unmuted if you would like to add anything.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the discussion. It said less than 3 minutes left on my screen. And so if I zip out of here, I don't know what that means, but I'm not trying to be rude. No,
that was the timer set for the speakers. So whenever speakers have the floor, they have the floor for 4 minutes.
Okay, I thought they were going to time me out. No, I just thank you all for your consideration, and I really appreciate it and hope that it works out. Thank you.
And I don't see any additional comments this evening. So council members, if you would please submit your votes via chat. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. And Sylvia, if you would please read the vote back to us.
Okay. Councilmember Rosengarten, aye. Councilmember Ellett, aye. Councilmember Reeds, aye. Councilmember Medicus abstains, and Councilmember Gonzalez abstains with the noted objection.
Thank you. Motion passes. And Sylvia, would you clarify while we're on the record what the process is for Dan to receive his money back?
We have to process through our accounting system and have you sign off, and our authorized signer sign off, and that's probably about a 7 to 10 day process.
Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for attending this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Council members, we are now at item number 8, presentation and possible deliberation and action from the council regarding recent action on banner expense and committee process. And the brief introduction I'll give to this is that I'm not looking for this to eat up a tremendous amount of time on our agenda. However, I wanted it to have the opportunity both for publication through an agenda and the ability, to the extent council members do want to discuss it or just be aware of what was being discussed. The reason I posted it for an agenda item is that I had started receiving so many emails and text messages from residents, and then realized there were multiple threads of communication where council members were not all included in each one of those threads. And so with that, I'll allow Sylvia to give as brief a presentation as possible so that we can get through this quickly and move on to other items.
Okay, Mayor and Council, thank you. The CED committee met after several meetings to discuss banners. They had previously agreed to award to Canales and Company for $15,000, and then that bid was later amended to $7,500 for part one and $7,500 for part two, for a total not to exceed $15,000. And then fabrication of the banners was estimated to be $10,000, so a total request not to exceed $25,000. So after that committee meeting, some committee members were unsatisfied with the vote, or were concerned about the vote, I should put it that way. The committee chair and the committee liaison tasked a committee member to seek additional input, additional bids for the banners. Those bids and the process were brought forward to the council. The council was presented with the original direction from CED committee and also the additional bids. Council voted on the alternate on the lower bid to Wahine Creative, which is $1,250 for several designs. And since that time, there has been additional discussion as to that should have come back to the committee if there was a change or some unhappiness about the Canales and Company selection, that it should have come back to the committee, and that should have been an item of discussion before it was presented to the council. And that's where we stand today.
Thank you. And so with that, so let me try that again. I was getting an echo. Thank you, Sylvia. And also part of why I broke this into two agenda items. So item number 9, we already passed on consent this evening, but that was me breaking out what I thought was the most critical lesson learned for me through all of the information that's in item number 8, which is one, to recognize that open meetings is already a requirement within our ordinances. So that's not something that we need to create. It is something we need to follow. Second, because it's clearly not being followed, we need to do a better job as a city and as leaders to ensure that all of our committees especially have the training they need to be able to follow the Open Meetings Act. Council members, do we have any comments before I move to residents? Councilmember Medicus.
Thank you, Mayor. When this came before council, I was voting for this under the auspice that what I had heard, that this was like an emergency. We needed to get these banners done quickly, and that, you know, we were, and I think I did state in the meeting that I wanted it to be clear that even though we might be doing this in a quick way or trying to get these put out quickly, that it may not actually match what we end up doing when we actually get to the RFP process and hire a company to look at our overall branding for the city, and that it might not look anything like where that ends up. And since Sylvia and Phil and I have had conversations with the shopping center managers, and certainly they didn't feel any emergency to get banners up, and they, even if we do put banners up or have a banner design, it would have to be approved by their marketing departments. And now with the additional information of how this all went, it seems to me we're right on the heels of the RFP, and perhaps it would be wise to step back and really let the company that we hire do the branding for the city, so that we do this once and it's all consistent with how we advertise our city and how we promote ourselves, and let one company handle all of this. So that's just my thoughts today.
Thank you, Karen. Councilmember Gonzalez. Hold on. There, now you have a hot mic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I am concerned about how that ever became a staff recommendation, and at some point I'd like some clarity on that. But I agree with Councilmember Medicus that we shouldn't be double branding, which I think I said at the time also last time. And so I do agree that I think we should wait in terms of getting the company that we're going to move forward with. I think, as I probably said before, having to brand and then rebrand is not a helpful thing to do, and I think that we're moving forward, and that there wasn't a lot of buy-in. I was very struck that there wasn't a lot of buy-in from the shopping centers. They have their own marketing companies, and they're doing fine, and in the way that they're talking about it, they're not all that interested in us taking this part over, and that part was I think significant to my agreement with Councilmember Medicus. So I think we should proceed. I think we should table this and move forward in a more coherent way. Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez, could I ask you to clarify? So on this, when you say table,
stop.
So just progress. So you're agreeing with, which is not to table it, that it would be that you all take action this evening that says don't continue moving forward with the action council voted on at the previous meeting.
Well, for a lot of reasons, but yes, that would be my
Okay.
my.
So tabling it would
right.
mean
I agree with you.
staff-
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you. That, right. We now if they have actually hired, which I don't know for sure that they have, but if they've actually hired and started working with the other group, I think it should stop.
Thank you. Sylvia, could you clarify where we're at from what council voted on at the last meeting? How far along are you, and what money has been committed?
$1,250 was the amount of the bid. She has delivered 3 draft ideas. Those were submitted yesterday. And it was the intent of the committee to review those this week.
So if council chose tonight to take action to stop, it would mean that we've lost 1,000, what was the number you gave? 1,250. 1,250, and we would own the concepts submitted, but we wouldn't spend any additional money moving forward with production or installation.
Correct.
Okay. Should council take that path?
Correct.
Councilmember Reitz?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the $1,250 is not a large sum of money. I would be interested to see what Waheen has come up with. And I'm interested to hear what the committee has to say about her designs, or their designs. And if they love the designs, I would suggest we move forward. If they are not crazy about the designs, I would suggest then perhaps we take a breather and pause it in this process.
Thank you, Councilmember Reitz. Do we have any additional council members who want to speak before we move to public comments? Penny, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I find it very interesting. Number one, we are committed to Wahidi. This contract was signed. And number two, if we go back to the last council meeting, whenever, the presentation was made for the $25,000 for the initial proposal, I got feedback as chairman of CED that there were a number of council members that were unhappy with spending that kind of money, a number of committee members who were uncomfortable spending that amount of money, because in the minutes from the prior month, it was absolutely presented that the committee said they did not want to spend that amount of money. It got passed, so we were bringing it forward. As an alternative, it was decided to go ahead and go the appropriate way of getting 3 bids to provide the council for the opportunity to say which one they wanted to spend. That much was done. I think it is only fair, once the amount of work that Wahine has put into it, that we owe her the courtesy to view her opportunities. And Wanda, I thank you for allowing that piece of information to come forward. We do. She's working hard on it. She's willing to do, she's got 4 different banners that she's bringing to our meeting tomorrow evening. Number 3, I think that Karen and Melissa, please understand that when you have a banner, banners can be adapted to represent the branding of whatever group you're working on, whether you make it destination, shopping, dining, etc. And how we want to do this, if we want to use the Sunset Valley piece behind it, if we want to do some work with it, this is where we're paying the marketing company to be able to use their brain cells to adapt it to whatever piece we're doing. As we're looking at the banners that we're going to be putting up, it is 2-sided, and the hardware has it so that one side is the original banner we're going to be approving, should all come through. The second part would be specifics to whatever that branding is going to be, whatever the holiday is going to be. And we want to make it something that's flexible and changeable. So branding, I don't see as a major problem. We are going to be branding as we go down the road. And it's going to take all of the RFPs or the proposals that I've reviewed, it's going to take 4 to 6 months for them to come back, us to get going and get that discovery period done. By that time, we have lost an entire year almost of marketing abilities. We need to do something. People come in to Sunset Valley and they don't even realize they're in Sunset Valley. I had a friend say to me, "Oh, Penny, I come down to Sunset Valley and shop. I was in Walmart the other day." Surprise, Walmart's not even in Sunset Valley. People don't realize. We need to advertise. And Karen, you and I have talked, and my understanding was that you were communicating with me about the different management companies. We talked about 2. We were going to be working on the 3rd one. One was excited and happy to go into as we planned down the road for the grand reopening of Sunset Valley. She said she was ready to go. The second one said she was excited, but she wanted to make sure all her companies were in and open before we did anything in her shopping area. So, I think that if the council is going to decide things after you've approved one thing, you are basically cutting CED out of the entire picture. And so what kind of a mission do we have if this is the way it's going to come out? I find it rather disappointing. And I think we all need to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Medicus.
Thank you, Mayor. And Penny, I don't discount any of the hard work that you've done on this. The conversations that we've had with the shopping center, one was with a gentleman who represents Market Fair, and he said he would be willing to actually install banners if we provided them. The Village Center, we had a conversation with, and she said any design would have to go through their marketing department for approval. And she wasn't sure where in the center, what poles, how many poles she had, where they could be installed. So it's still a process that would need to be gone through and identified exactly where they would go. But either way, it'd have to be approved through them. The design would have to be approved before we actually printed them and expected them to go up in the centers. The third center, which is the Homestead, that gentleman did not respond to our multiple requests for an interview, but Sylvia did end up talking to him briefly, and only her, and he basically said they didn't need anything, and he'd let us know if they did, and he didn't have time to talk. So that's kind of where we left all of that. The two centers we did talk to were open to doing community events or something like that after the recovery of COVID. So I'm in the process of getting Sylvia's final comments on her notes from those conversations, and then I'll put that into a formal report from us to the committees. But my concern here is more about the consistency. We can get the designs from the company that's already worked on some of them, and that can be shared with the marketing firm if we go in that direction. But it's the overall consistency. I thought we were in a big rush, but I didn't get that sense from the shopping centers, and they were more concerned with the signs that show who's open and who's got curbside delivery, who's got inside dining, which are those small signs that they're already putting up, and with their curbside availability for pickup. That was their main concern. So I just, after hearing all of that, I just didn't feel like we were in such a rush that we could make an informed decision. And council was not presented with what your committee voted on. And that's a concern.
It was included in the backup, Karen. In the staff recommendation, it was clear that the committee had voted. As a matter of fact, here's the actual what's in italic. This is what was presented to the council. There is.
I understand that, but there was no discussion allowed back to the committee about the other options.
Oh, correct. And that's what's the issue tonight that I raised. Yes.
Exactly.
Councilor Medicus, were you done with your comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Lisa, you have the floor.
Hey, it's John Popola. Hey, how are you? Okay. So I, for everyone who likes long reading, my 15-page document was submitted, but the purpose of that submission was really simple. A lot of committee members, myself included, but also Roger and Penny and everybody else who's put the time in on the committee process and in the committee meetings, which run long like this meeting does. I'm new to this process, and so I wanted to understand sort of what the power of the process was meant to be, because as has already been stated, not only did we vote as a committee to move forward with Canales, we were doing that after City Council had already voted to approve the budget that we were recommending. And I think that sequence made sense to me, and it was the subsequent quick actions by a subset of the committee that caused me to have concern and raise my objections and submit the sort of full picture as I understood it. I definitely wholeheartedly agree with Council Member Medicus that at this point, we should move forward with the full picture and the full process and have the brand be integrated into in one voice. Branding is not just about like a logo or a typeface. It's about the way we communicate, and it stands on top of a story about what the city is, what we're looking to accomplish. And that's what that process, I think, is hopefully going to bring to life. And committee members, including Roger, had put a lot of time into that RFP. And I think it was that investment was rewarded with 11 firms. so I want to turn my attention to the future because I agree. I think having put a lot of time in, having voiced this concern and invested the time in laying it out for everyone to read if they are geeky like me, looking at, I think we really need to think about how we right size the process and how we empower people to contribute meaningfully. To that end, looking ahead, we've received 11 submissions totaling 639 pages of content. I know I will speak for myself. I have a full-time job. I run a small creative business. I want to be able to review all this material, provide notes to the committee, and then have the committee all be able to engage. We are not currently on course to be able to do that. We have a meeting set for tomorrow night and then the subsequent night. There's no world in which I could review that material. So I think we
John,
have.
can I stop you there? And if you're going to speak to the RFP and because I also saw you've sent some emails, and I think those are I'm already on that and agreeing that might be valid to push things out, but that is not part of this agenda item, and it would be something for Penny and Sylvia.
I'll just conclude then and say that one thing I just would ask that the council consider when thinking about cost. Some communications have been like, oh, well, this is just a cheap little banner process and we can just sort of get it out there and then we'll get rid of it. I just ask that you consider the value of all the contributions of the volunteers in the committee as part of that cost calculation. If we collectively put, several hundred man hours into a process and then we just sort of throw it away as a $1,200 design, I think that discourages people like myself to participate. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Can I just also, I wanted to say one quick thing is my original banner proposal was a little bit more citywide. And I think it got kind of reduced down to an emergency measure. And I think that just to address concerns that Chief Carter has, that the city needs a presence. It needs a delineation, branding effort that's larger than just hurry up and shop at Sunset Valley. It's a little bit bigger project than that, and hopefully we can give it the time and attention it deserves.
Thank you. And I'm going to move us. I see there's some people who have not been recognized yet. I'm going to recognize everybody who hasn't spoken on this topic. I'm not going to re-recognize anybody so that we can move on since we have quite a few items this evening. Mickey, you have the floor.
Okay.
Hi, Mickey. We can
Sorry.
hear you now.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't think I have my video on, but I did want to comment partly in support of Penny's remarks and partly in support of other people because the committee did work very hard on this. And I think that we felt that we had more or less a go-ahead to try to get something up as businesses started to reopen so that it's not necessarily our whole branding thing or what we're going to end up with in the long run, but something to delineate our boundaries and something to show the people as they go down Brody Lane and down the access road exactly that, hey, we're open and, something new that they haven't seen before. So I'm very concerned, when I hear about, well, we went and asked this shopping center and that shopping center and, oh, they have to get corporate approval. I mean, if you have to ask everybody and their mama dog about this, you're not going to get a consensus probably for a very, very long time. So although I am interested in going through the RFPs and doing the things that we have to do to kind of get a full program going, at the same time, I hope that the council and the people will give some confidence to this committee. In the past, when I call this the committee that was run by 5 little old ladies before we had our new people join, who are just the most wonderful additions to this committee because of their experiences. But basically we had a design, we kind of collected designs of our own, we picked it, we worked within our budget, and the things went up that we had. And now I see, of course, that there's a necessity for more than that. But at the same time, I don't think that you want to hog tie the committee and go into asking all the shopping centers what kind of banners they want. I want something in our main areas where people flow through, where they see things. I want them to see something that, hey, we're open now. We're open again. And if we change those banners a little bit later at some point when we have a full program, that's fine too. But to wait a year or wait 6 months or something is really of concern to me. So I hope there's some kind of a middle ground in this, I think is what I'm asking, so that people can get an instant idea of our city being back in action, at the same time that we work on making that a permanent and ongoing living thing as we rebrand ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. And I have Terry Cowan and Councilmember Ellett. Penny, I'm not going to recircle around for additional secondary comments tonight so that we can move on. We have 4 agenda items. There is not, at this point, I don't think there's a possibility that we're going to get through everything on our agenda by 10 o'clock. So I want to move on since this is a low action and maybe no action item. Council members, I'm going to take the last 2 comments for people that have their hands raised, and then I'm going to ask one final time if there is any actual action that council wants to take. So if one of you wants to take action, please start preparing the motion that you would like to make. Terry, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you all for serving and giving up your evenings to be the government for the city. My concerns are really focused on the processes of the committees. It's really important that all committees are subject to the same procedures, the same due process, and that they're consistent in how they conduct the business of the city, their portion of the business of the city. The committees have been a valuable asset and have been a primary place for citizens to participate in the government. They allow citizens to come together and make recommendations to council, directly to council, that come from the citizens studying a problem, coming up with solutions to the problem, and providing that information forward. So there's a couple of things I want to bring up specifically, and one is that I'd heard that the recommendations of the committee were not presented to council, but they were modified in some way. And that is not okay. It's destructive to the process. As people have already said, that should have been taken back to the committee, discussed there, and then when a recommendation came forward to council, it would have been endorsed for the entire committee rather than a subset that modified it. Secondly, the committees need to follow the rules on due process, on prior notice. There was a CED had a called work session. I asked about prior, like not sufficient notice under our procedures. I was told it was an executive meeting and that there were only 3 people participating. However, I had in my possession an email that demonstrated that it was sent out to all the committee members and it was called a work session. This could be because people aren't familiar with what the process should be, and then perhaps we need to retrain people on what those processes are.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback, but my point is that let's all be on the same page. The committee work is really valuable. We all need to follow the same procedures. We all need to honor and respect the work of the committee and not change it before it gets to council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. And Terry, I don't know if you were in or paying attention. So we did approve the other item this evening that was partnered with this, which is item 9. So we will be ensuring that committees have training on open meetings. I do think some of what happened here was not maliciously or intentionally done. And so the work session you're referring to, that wasn't done as a way to it was just not realized by the chair that even in an email or a phone call, that anything that involves more than 2 members of the committee, that justifies a quorum, which then means you have to call the meeting, which means it has to be posted. And so that was not a called meeting. it was not posted. And so in the future, that's where we just need to ensure that chairs and liaisons have the training they need, and that staff also be the right goalkeeper for that, and that staff also make sure to keep that in check. And so anytime there's committee members wanting to meet, that the staff remind them that it needs to be a called meeting. Councilmember Ellett.
Thank you. First of all, let me just thank Penny and Mickey for the comments they made. This has been a long time. I think the banners go back, and Penny can correct me, I want to say 90 days, 120 days. And they came about to identify Sunset Valley. This is Sunset Valley. You are now shopping in Sunset Valley. And there was a lot of very good reasons for that. We have taken, the committee has taken a tremendous amount of effort on this. They spent over 120 days. And 3 proposals were presented to the council. There was a staff recommendation to go with the least expensive, which is I motioned for that one because I think I'm cost sensitive, especially in these times. We've heard earlier on how one of our main contributors or only contributors, HOP funds, is not going to be contributing. So in my opinion, I'm not interested in sacrificing quality. I think we will get quality from the people that we have selected. And let me remind that I'm glad Sylvia pointed out the 3 options were presented. I nominated the one the staff recommended because it was the most cost effective, whilst at the same time I didn't think it was going to compromise on quality, number one. Many council members, at least 2 council members on that, thanked the CED committee for saving money. And I appreciate those comments, and I know Penny does as well. We have now committed to Wahine, who I've never met before until the introduction call, which took place late last week. They seem responsive. We've committed, we've expended, or are about to expend $1,200, or we're committed to expend $1,250. And as Mickey said, branding takes a long time. This is not something that we select. If we select a marketing company in the next 30 days, that they're going to turn a switch on and all of a sudden we'll have a brand. These are banners that can be changed in the future. These are banners, as Mickey rightly pointed out, advertise Sunset Valley as a city. And I think to not go forward right now is disingenuous to the people we contracted with, and it's disingenuous to the hard work the CED has put in. So I'll leave my thoughts there. And again, I want to thank the way CED took to heart here the task of finding a solution at minimal cost so that we could get something out there with quality and show that Sunset Valley is alive and well, and this is a place to come and do business, shop, and eat. And I have no more to say, and I think it'd be a terrible shame if we usurp what the decision that's been made unanimously by council members last week and is a reflection of the hard work done by the CED committee. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, I, especially because there may be no action, I don't want us to keep spinning on this item. I'd like for us to move on with the remainder of our agenda. Councilmember Gonzalez, you are the next council member to have your hand up, so I'm going to recognize you. If you want to add to it, great. And then also, if you have a motion, if you would please put that forth. You have the floor.
Mayor, can you hear me? Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I had myself muted. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to go ahead and put a motion that we. I'm gonna put it as a. I have a little bit of problem with what Councilmember Ellett said, because it was either an illegal if it was CED, it was an illegal meeting, and if it wasn't CED, then we shouldn't say the committee did it. So I just have a problem with that right there. But going forward, in terms of what council action did, I would like to move that we stop. And as Councilmember Reed said, we look at what was done, and the committee can talk about that, and that we move forward with the marketing committee that we're moving in. So we stop work. My motion is to stop work with where we are, with what we paid. People can assess what we wanted to do after they look at the designs that we did. We're in for the 1,200 or whatever we're in for, and that we stop at this point and reassess. So that's my motion. We'll see if we have a second.
Thank you. And I just lowered everybody's hands in part. Again, I don't have video feed on, so it's distracting to me. So I don't have any video feeds in front of me. I literally only use the hands to follow what we're doing. So if there is a second, I've lowered all the other hands that were up. If there is a second council member, who'd like to second that to open it for discussion, Councilmember Medicus.
Yes, I'd like to second it and offer a friendly amendment.
Okay, you and the motion maker both have hot mics, so go ahead.
I agree with the motion to accept we accept the designs that Wahine has already done and that we've paid for, and that we go no further with those. And I would tie that, go no further with those until a decision is made on the RFP. And at that point, make a decision as to whether to go forward with the temporary design.
I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Thank you. And then could either one of you or Bray Jean, could somebody read the motion now as it stands?
Councilmember Gonzalez, do you want me to restate it?
Go ahead.
So the motion to receive the designs we paid Wahine for, go no further until a decision is made on the marketing RFP and the efforts can be coordinated.
Thank you, Councilmember Medicus. Does that match Councilmember Gonzalez?
Works fine for me.
Great. Okay. So with that, I'll now recognize council members, and then if there are residents at that time. So Penny, if you want to raise your hand and jump in again, now that we have a motion on the table, we'll go and recognize another round of comments if needed. Councilmember Reitz.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like the CED committee to have the ability to go forward with the banners if they like the designs. And it's not a large amount of money. We're talking about another $5,000 some odd dollars. And that would get something up temporarily for the next 6 months, because realistically speaking, I don't think a marketing firm is going to have anything ready for us for quite some time. I think it'll be a little while before we select the firm, and then for them to get all of their research done and to come back to us with design. So I think that process will be a while. I do think there is value in delineating where Sunset Valley our borders are, and to let people understand this is where Sunset Valley is. So I do think it's not a large amount of money. So I would disagree with the motion. And but I would say that if the committee doesn't like the designs, that we not go forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reitz. And now that I've listened to tonight's deliberation, I would agree with that, that if the money is already committed for the 1,250, to halt without knowing that those designs are going to be presented to CED this week. What if one of them is wonderful, or what if there is a very strong consensus on the committee that this is a great stopgap? And we've talked about a grand reopening of the city, but in that there may be an opportunity to have a celebration, but right now our retail district has already reopened. And so I think anything we can do quickly to make our city look a little bit more recognizable, a little bit, even just refresh, something that even people who are familiar with Sunset Valley, when they drive through, they can say, oh, well, that looks different. There's something new that I'm not used to seeing when I drive through this city. So I think I agree with Councilmember Reitz. And so maybe I would say the compromise would be before staff moves forward with spending any more money, that the results of tomorrow's CE or the next CED meeting, when they review the concepts, that we get to hear back from them first before myself or Sylvia commits any more city funds to the project. Penny, you are actually the next person to be recognized. And sorry for you have a hot mic, and sorry for lowering your hand twice earlier.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor. Terry, I want to clarify something with you. I take responsibility as chairman of CED. When I sent out that email to all the committee members, I meant to keep open transparency and to allow everyone to have a voice in it, not be secretive or anything of that sort. I also take responsibility. I was not aware of the open meeting guidelines. My husband brought it to me because he sits on the board for the University of Pittsburgh and said, Penny, you can't do this. Immediately, we stopped the process and we met with just, trying to get things going. So I accept responsibility. I didn't know. Trust me, I was the one that asked Sylvia and Rose to get the training for everyone, because obviously we don't want to be illegal, illicit, or immoral in any way. We are trying to do what's best for the city. So please understand that. And all council members, we really are working hard. We've put many, many hours in, and you've got to realize that, Wanda, I think that you're absolutely right. We need to do as much support as we can for our businesses. And we're actually even, and can I throw out one minute? I promise I won't take a long time. We are planning a spirit day for the residents of Sunset Valley. Mass distribution to every resident saying on such and such a date, we're going to go into the stores in Sunset Valley. You don't have to buy anything, just go in and say, hi, I'm Penny Seidel, and I am a resident of Sunset Valley. We value your business, your support, and we're here to support you. Number one, our citizens are involved. Number two, our businesses realize we are supporting them. And then we're building that trust that we saw when we were talking earlier about giving back funds that were held for how many years. I'm hoping that when we look at, Karen, making Sunset Valley a destination, that we can include his barn for a piece of events that we can advertise. But we've got to all work together for this. We can't be going in multiple directions and everybody not knowing what everybody else is doing. So understand, Terry, transparency is my key word. And that's what I want all of us to be able to do. Working together with Arts Commission, CED, we can do marvelous things if we just get it together and then move forward in a straight line together. Thank you. I'm sorry. You got me on my horse. Sorry.
Thank you, Penny. And I'm glad you got to have a final word on that, because I would concur as somebody who also got caught in the middle and take some of the responsibility for wishing, now that I have more insight, I wish that I would have done more to help Penny see the light that we didn't even know we weren't seeing, and to help Sylvia. You learn as you start hearing residents chime in about what they're hearing or what they've seen. So again, that's what this item was meant. The reason I sponsored it was to try to hit reset, especially because of those RFPs. I don't want a single member of CED, regardless of how they felt about the banners, I don't want any of them to feel like either council doesn't care about their opinions, because I know they do. I also don't want the CED members to feel like myself or staff or any individual is trying to undermine process. And the RFP is going to be a big one. And with 11 applicants, and it's going to be much more divisive, much more expensive, much more subjective, meaning each one of us is going to have such strong opinions about who we like and why we like them. And because they're coming to present to us, I want to make sure that all of us are working together. So tonight was meant to try to say, we're going to do the training that will help. And then each one of us is going to pay closer attention. And Penny, thank you for everything, because I know you accidentally got raked over the coals over the last week, and I really did feel bad for you for that. So thank you for sticking with us. Council members, do we have any additional comments? We do have a motion that needs to be voted on. Councilmember Rosengarten.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I agree with Councilmember Reitz. I would not vote for the motion on the table. And I want to say to all the folks on the Community and Economic Development Committee, don't give up. Your opinions do matter. Keep working towards it. So please don't give up. You have some great ideas, and we have some marketing people on CED. Please Don't shy away from getting involved. Continue doing it. Your turn comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Mayor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Karen, would you go back to my original motion so that Wanda's concerns, that way they could move forward? And we have a stopping place, and they can move forward if they're in love, if they're in love with it. Would that be okay with you?
Sorry, hold on. You just asked Councilmember Medicus a question, but she does not have a hot mic. Okay, Councilmember Medicus, you have a hot mic.
Yes, I'd be amenable to that. I don't want to discourage either people who have dedicated a lot of time and energy and bring a new level of expertise to this committee from feeling like they want to walk away from this. So I do hope that people stay involved, even though this was kind of an unfortunate situation. I hope everybody stays together and we continue to work towards the ultimate goal of branding our city and identifying what our unique selling point is as a city, and that we can be a place people want to come and feel good about being in.
Okay, so it sounds like we have agreement of at least 3 council members here, if I'm calling this right, where we're kind of going back to my original motion that we're taking a little pause here. If people like it, they can proceed. If they don't, they can. It kicks it back into the CED committee as a whole. And we can also take a stop if that's what people on the committee decide. So I think that's a good summation of what I'm hearing everybody agree to. So I put that forward. So then
you either need to just
new motion.
Scrap your motion and do a new one that's super clean and simple of exactly what council wants to see happen next.
So super clean and simple. We're going to take a break here. And we're going to pay the people for what they've done. We will allow CED to assess, and they can either stop or move forward as the committee deems appropriate as a whole. The committee as a whole deems appropriate.
Okay, so would you maybe, that doesn't sound like an amendment. Would you and Karen, or sorry, you and Councilor Medicus pull the motion?
Is that all right with you, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, so it's pulled, and that's the substitute motion.
Okay, could you make the motion as a clear motion?
We pay Wahine for the existing work, and then we allow the committee to assess as to whether they want to move forward. If the committee as a whole wants to move forward or take a break.
We have a motion. Do we have a second from Councilmember Medicus, which will open it for discussion?
Second.
I have a question for Councilmember Gonzalez. When you say as a whole, do you mean majority, or are you saying that your motion requires a unanimous vote?
No, as a majority. It's just I just want the committee to be able to get back to itself and heal over this. That's kind of my goal here.
Okay. So in the motion where you say as a whole, you mean a normal vote process?
A normal majority.
Right.
Right.
That will come back to council.
Right.
Okay, council members, do we have any additional comments based on the motion that is on the table? Councilmember Rosengarten?
I'm sorry, because she changed her motion totally, I have no comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellett?
Yeah, thank you. I think I understand the motion. Why is that any different from not having any motion? We would go
because the motion that council had made before, I don't think required something to come back to council for final approval. I could be wrong, but either way, this motion clarifies that. Meaning, I think that what we had approved before would have allowed myself and staff and the committee to move forward with production and installation. This requires anything the committee votes on based on the proposals, the design proposals, that their vote comes back to council, and council can then decide if they want to proceed with fabrication and installation.
That's not actually accurate, Mayor.
You have the floor, Councilmember Gonzalez. What do you wish to qualify?
I would qualify that this allows the committee to, the intention here is that some people on the committee felt that like they were cut out of process, and this allows the committee to pause if the majority of the committee feels like they should pause, and it allows them to move forward if the majority of the committee believes that they can move forward. So that is the difference here.
So Councilmember Ellett, for me as the mayor, what it means to me is no more money will be committed, no more action will be taken by Sylvia or myself until the committee provides a recommendation, and council will then review that recommendation. Councilmember Ellett, do you have any additional questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we take one final comment. Penny, do you have a quick comment?
I would have.
Penny,
If it
you have
has
the floor now.
Yes, thank you. If it has to come back to council to be approved, then we're talking timeline next council meeting before we can move forward at all. Other than, because she's going to come to our meeting tomorrow evening and have her ideas. She will take any kind of suggestions and changes on the 4 banners that she's done a mock-up on, and take feedback from the committee, take it back and revamp it again so that it does talk to the way we want it to be. And then once that's approved as a committee, if we approve it, when we approve it, then we bring it back. Again, time is of the essence here. I'm kind of a little concerned. Why could it not be that if the committee as a whole approves what we're talking about having as the banners or banner, that we can move forward and get them up and out there on Brody, on, Jones Road, etc., so that people know they're in Sunset Valley.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez, could you speak to that?
Mary, you're inserting that. I'm saying what Penny's saying. And I'm saying exactly what Penny's saying.
I'm not inserting it, Councilmember Gonzalez, to be clear. If I'm inserting it, it means the motion's not clear to me. So it's not that I'm trying to convolute your motion. It means your motion's not clear to me. So let's make sure that the motion is clear.
What Penny said is my intention.
Okay, so then what I hear is that the motion is not to table this, not to halt it, but instead to allow CED to make a decision as to how they want to proceed with the banners.
It is stopped until they decide to move forward as a committee, because that way that allows the whole committee to feel like they have a voice. So it's stopped until they restart it as a committee.
Right. So you're
right
saying
now it would go
comes...
forward. It would go forward if I didn't make this motion to clarify what Councilmember Ellett asked. If I didn't make this motion, then it would just go. And I'm making this motion so that people who felt like they were lost get to catch up, and that the committee as a whole can do that.
The clarification in this that I would like for all of you, now that I'm better understanding the motion, which was not clear to me, this means that CED would make the selection and that the selection would not come back to council. So if you were to vote for this, that's what you would be voting for. Council members, I'm going to ask for council members only to speak at this point so that we can take a vote and move on. We've got to move on. It is 9:15. We need to move on to other items. Councilmember Medicus.
Oh, I just want to be a clarification. Are we saying that whatever, if the committee likes the design, then they're going to go ahead and print them and council will never see it?
Yes, that's what I just heard from Councilmember Gonzalez, which is not what I understood the motion to be. But yes, it would be that the committee votes, and not a whole, a unanimous, as in unanimous, whole as in majority. So a normal vote power would allow the fabrication and installation to proceed, and that it would not be coming back to council.
It would have to go before the marketing departments for approval for the senders.
No, that's not the motion. That, based on what Councilmember Gonzalez just said, she's basically saying that the committee would get to vote on which banner and if they want that banner to be produced and installed. And Councilmember Gonzalez, raise your hand. It's definitely important that the motion maker and second be clear on what the motion is, and then council members, we need to make sure that all of us understand what we're voting on.
Then I would remove my second.
Okay. Councilmember Gonzalez. We now
Mayor,
are looking, we now need a
yeah,
second.
I'm trying to not change what we were doing. I'm trying to just let the committee catch up. And so was it everybody's understanding that it was all coming back? Is that what
Yeah,
because
that
I
was
think
my
it's hard.
yes. My understanding was that you would allow CED to make a recommendation and that council would still have an opportunity to see the design and to take have a final deliberation and vote before spending any more money.
What was it before? What was if Wahini was going forward? Would we have had another look at what they did?
Sylvia, could you go back and read the exact motion as approved at the previous council meeting?
Let me go back to the minutes. I'm going to pause my screen right quick.
Mayor, while she's pulling that up, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Is this item on the agenda for the meeting tomorrow night?
I don't have the CED agenda in front of me.
And he says it is. Okay.
So Mayor, the item is in front of you. The minutes that you guys just approved is Councilmember Ellett made a motion to approve staff's recommendation to award Wahini Creative in the amount of $1250, Ads Venture for the fabrication in the amount of $5865 for a total of $7115 for the purchase of 50 banners. So no, it did not appear this item would come back to council.
Thank you. And that is the motion and Councilmember Gonzalez, let me unmute you. So could you restate what your motion is, because you now need a second?
I'm going to withdraw my motion at this point because clearly there isn't a consensus. I thought there was, and I was just trying to speak to the consensus. So I'm going to withdraw and we'll let somebody else try.
Okay. So council members, if we don't have any action tonight, what Sylvia just read to you is what will happen. So it actually sounds like if you guys do nothing tonight, the committee can meet tomorrow, they can make a selection, and then it will move forward based on what you already approved, which is the fabrication and installation costs. Sylvia, is that correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Rosengarten?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just recommend all of council to be present in the CED committee tomorrow night. That way we have the heads up of what we're looking at and what the ideas are if you want to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reitz?
So yeah, I think that's a good idea to listen in on the meeting. I do not have a problem personally with letting the CED make the recommendation. They have a lot more marketing background than I do. I could probably add my 2 cents worth, and that might be worth about 2 cents. So I don't think there's a motion that needs to happen from my perspective. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Mayor?
Yes, sorry, your hand was up and it may have just been up from before. Okay, council members, so I will move on with the agenda. And so what will happen, since no action was taken, was that the action from your previous meeting will stand, which will allow CED to select from the submissions from the designer, Wahini, and that assuming that one is selected and assuming that there is a majority vote, then fabrication and installation would go forward without anything coming back to council. Councilmember Medicus, did you want to say anything else?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We are now moving to item number 10. Sorry. Sylvia, am I correct? We're done with 9. So item number 10 is our next item. And am I correct that you wanted me to table item number 12? Till the next meeting?
Correct, item number 12, and it really goes hand in hand with item number 11. So I'm requesting tabling item number 11 and number 12.
Item number 11 and 12. And so am I the sponsor on 11? Who's the sponsor on 11?
Councilmember Gonzalez and Councilmember Medicus.
Okay, so item 12 is mine, so I will pull that. It doesn't require action to table it. Item number 11, do either of the sponsors want to motion to table that to the next meeting? Councilmember Medicus?
Motion to table to the next
We have a
meeting.
motion. Thank you. We have a motion to table. Do we have a second? Councilmember Gonzalez? Oops, sorry. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Second.
Do we have any commentary on, we are tabling item number 11 to the next meeting, and I have pulled item number 12 because it had erroneous numbers in it. So those will both come back at the next meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And Sylvia, if you would please read the vote back.
I keep muting. Councilmember Gonzalez, aye. Councilmember Ellett, aye. Councilmember Medicus, aye. Councilmember Reeds, aye. Councilmember Rosengarten, aye.
Thank you. We have 3 items left tonight. We do have a hard stop at 10 p.m. Based on our city ordinance to end meetings no later than 10 p.m. Item number 10 is water and wastewater system and public works activities presentation with possible action and or direction from council. Councilmember Gonzalez, this is, well, actually for either the sponsors and or staff, who would like to take the lead?
This is Councilmember Gonzalez's item.
Councilmember Gonzalez, would you like to lead the presentation?
Yes, Mayor.
Excellent. You have the floor.
Thank you. It just wants to keep doing this to me. Sorry, hold on a second. Let me move this. All right. If you could scroll down a little bit thank you. Okay. So this is part of a 2-part presentation. I'm going to have to put the second part on another because there's just so much information on this topic. One of the things that I think people aren't necessarily familiar with is that we're members of the Texas Rural Water Association. They are an incredibly cool group of people who take care of small cities and towns and water districts. And there's like 50 towns that they deal with, and lots and lots and lots of small towns and water districts throughout. And they're the people who advocate for those of us that are little. And they are kind of like the TML of small water, the way that the Texas Municipal League works for cities, they work for water. They give us a lot of the same things that the TML does. They give us free legal advice. They give us all kinds of advice, and they keep small water working. So it's great. And so this, to Councilmember Rosengarten's concern, gets us a lot of stuff for free. Part of researching this, I had previously been a very strong advocate for a cost of service study. I now am not. The reason that I'm not is because we aren't where we should be to do that. Because you can't do future costs, you have to do current costs. And these people can help us with that. So again, another way to get good information for free. So it's good to go wander around on their site, and yay us for being part of them. And I talked to them. If you want to slide down one more slide for me, Sylvia, thank you. The part of this presentation that I'm going to focus on the most is water system operator regulations. And this is a thing that even people in Public Works didn't really understand. We have to have, in Sunset Valley, because of the amount of connections that we have, someone who holds at least a Class C license or higher. This person has to work every single day, or these people have to work every single day and record the results. This is something that we have to do every single day. And this person has to sign off on it. So this is, and they do testing, and this has to all be recorded. Next slide, please. And we're talking about our water. I'm sorry, we went too far. So did we miss one, Sylvia? Go back before that, just because it seemed like it went faster. Okay, yeah, there we go. So there, thank you. So Sunset Valley has, at this point, only one qualified person who has a Class B, which is higher than a Class C, but it doesn't make you two people. And he does this. He's been doing this job for almost 2 months now, 7 days a week. And to me, it is unreasonable to ask somebody, especially with a small baby, to work 7 days a week. And he cannot have a day off. There's nobody else for him to delegate this to. No one else is licensed at all right now. And this is not sustainable under normal circumstances because, you know, people need to have a day off, illness, vacation. And now we have a pandemic. We even had our accountant off for a while because we have to worry this. So we have to have this person sign off. This person has to run the tests. So we need to get more people. FEMA guidelines say to plan for a 20 to 40% reduction in staff. So this is why I'm focusing on this right now. Next slide, please. This is the guidance from Larry Bell, who is the Technical Assistance Director, and he's the head person who would be sending people out to us to talk, what they call circuit riders. And this is from a letter which I have supplemented down there. So we have to have a licensed operator do this. And this is speaking to being council members. If we don't do this, we are actually subject to potentially being fined. If someone else were to sign off on this or something else like that, we're liable. So me, as one of 6 people who's in charge of signing off on this, is concerned because I don't feel like we're being responsible, and certainly not during a pandemic, if we do not have at least another C person for backup, both to give this person a break and just because we're running a utility. It seems unreasonable to me to not have enough people to do it. And just as perspective, this time last year, we had 4 people with a C license or above and a D license. So that's where we were just a year ago. Okay, next slide, please. We have 3 pages of public works activities, and a significant number of these require either that person having a license or significant education to be able to complete those activities. But this is just our short list of things that Public Works does right now in the pandemic. This is what was presented at Public Works. We just, and thank you to Alfonso. I have to really say thank you because he really did help me with this presentation. And he pulled this out from the last one. And this is just to give people a sense of all the things that Public Works is still doing with this very small number of people we have. And this is not the full list of what you usually get. This is just what's happening right now. And it's, we need more people. There's to me, unreasonable expectations of what people are doing. And when I see somebody like Sam one person cutting a tree on Ernest Robles Way or Jones with nobody there checking for traffic or backing up to make sure. One of the things with OSHA is that you're actually, our insurance is actually higher for Public Works employees than it is for police departments because they're more likely to get killed than a police officer because the machines they use eat people. And so it really matters that we have sufficient staff. And I think that's another thing that people don't understand is how much we ask of our staff. So we need to have enough people. At a minimum, I would say we need another C person and possibly a D. And so because we need to have enough backup. If you'll slide down past those three, but things like the fire hydrants, we have to have at least a D. So yes, we could get somebody with a D to pass the test, which is what I've been told, but it won't. It hasn't happened yet. They have to, and the testing hasn't even opened up yet. So when you look at this slide, this just tells you that we have that this is the backup that says we have to do this every day. That's what this backup is. And what's the lower part of this is what I highlighted, that we could be fined as a council if we don't if we don't operate this correctly. Next slide, please. And this is the actual one off of the TCEQ that shows the disinfectant levels, the tests that they have to do, just for backup. Next slide, please. I'm going a little faster just because it's late and I know people's attentions. So these are the actual rules, and this is what we as a council need to be doing. We need to ensure that we're running our system at the minimal acceptable operating practices for public drinking water systems. This is what we need to ensure. And next slide, please. And this thing that I highlighted, we have slightly more than 250 connections, and this is what that shows. This is the backup that shows that this is what we have to do. Next slide, please. So now we're sort of getting into the rules. Public water systems shall not allow new or repaired production, treatment, storage, pressure maintenance, or to place a source without the prior guidance or approval of the licensed work operators. That one wasn't the one I hope. So we just need to pay attention. I'm sorry, go to the next slide too, please. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the other ones are the letters. If you'll go down one more time to my main points, the summation. Thank you. So basically, those are what I'm asking for is that we need to be able to be functional and add back. We don't have to have. We can have it at a tech level. We can have a C that isn't the high levels of C's that we carried, like Katie had it, Josh had it. That we had people who we had higher. We don't need that. We just need a C license. That's what. And that same C license can be the person who's backing up Sam, so that there's another person there helping cut the trees. But we need someone with that license just to be safe. And then and then a D license is fine for backup, but they can't really, if the pandemic strikes, we're not okay with just having a D license. We need to have someone with a C license at least for backup. And then let's see what else. The other thing that I really would like to ask, besides getting 1 to 2 more staff back instantly, is to have us go ahead and have what they call a circuit rider come. And that's what's going to be the second part of my presentation when we talk about the water utility study that they can help us with. We can do this without having to spend the $20,000, but where we start seeing how we ought to set up our utility. And we can do this where we pay attention to the things that were a concern to Councilmember Reitz. We can do this where we have significant input, but we learn what kinds of things we need to have a functional utility. And that's really my goal here, and has been for a long time, is that we have a functional utility. And if we're subsidizing, that we know what we're subsidizing and what we should be paying attention to. And that these people can come, they'll set it up, and they'll tell us all these things. And it's not going to cost us. It's already paid for in our membership, and they're ready to do it. But I wanted to make sure we had council approval, and that everybody was interested, and everybody's concerns were addressed before I asked, for a presentation or anything else like that from them. So those are the things where we learn from the experts what we need to have in place to set up our utility. It will not cost us anything additional, and that we instantly direct the city administrator to hire someone with a C license and preferably someone also with a D license, but I'm willing to say we can wait until the existing people take the tests and see whether they get a D license or not. But we need another person with a C license at a minimum. Thank you. That would be my conclusion until people have questions. Thank you.
And Melissa, can I ask one question? Are you looking for some specific action? Or are you just looking for discussion this evening?
No, those two things that we direct staff to get someone with a C license hired. And there's even a link on the website where we can, for $25, put up an extra, job app for that on the TWA where the people are looking for that. But we need to have a C person, or you can bring back Josh if you want, but you have to have a C person with a license that is tech, and then we at least won't have people standing out in the street by themselves cutting trees. We could also have them doing other things.
Did I just hear you say that you're suggesting that council vote tonight to bring Josh back as an employee?
I am asking for a C license. I'm not asking for any individual at all. I'm asking for a C license. You could also bring a D back, and I'd be happy, but a C license at a minimum, and direct us to be able to have a site visit from a circuit rider to start our process for evaluating our utility.
Great, thank you.
Those are the two.
Councilmember Gonzalez, were you wanting to say more? You said your two things, and then were you wanting to?
That's my motion. That's my motion.
Wait. Oh, you've made a motion?
I will make a motion because I've got the mic. It's hard to get back to it. I'll take questions too, but I would make a motion that we do those two items.
Would you just state it as a motion, please?
Sure. That we direct staff to hire someone with a tech with a C license, and that we ask the Texas Rural Water Association to come and do an assessment with a circuit rider. Those are my two suggestions. My motion.
Not suggestions, motion. Okay, we have a clear motion for two things. Do we have a second? And I'm going to lower the hands that are up. Council members, if there is a second to that motion to open it for discussion. Councilmember Rosengarten?
I am not seconding that motion. I have
further. Hold on. Then we need to first see if there is a second. Councilmember Medicus?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion which opens it for discussion. Councilmember Medicus, while you have the floor, is there anything that you wanted to ask as a question to staff?
No, I just wanted to open it for discussion.
Thank you. Sylvia, when I heard it in the presentation, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. When we had Katie here, we had 3 people with a C or higher license.
We had Katie, Josh, and Daniel.
And their license were active, and I mean, whatever the equivalent of active is, up to date.
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay. And then how hard or difficult or expensive is it to train one of our existing staff members?
So first of all, let me shed light on the operator. So the way the rules go, the Class C operator would manage and oversee what is essentially a Class D, which is what we're working to get the maintenance techs trained on. Councilmember Gonzalez touched on the point that the testing centers are closed. We do have 2 techs that we are preparing to take those D courses. It is an online course that, for whatever reason, this city was adamantly opposed to allow online testing, even though it is a TCEQ test that's administered online. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I have to say it out loud, if we brought back any of the additional staff, I guarantee you we would lose current staff. The environment within Public Works has been not only much more productive and team oriented, we have destroyed some of the silos that existed. What you had in the Public Works Department is a license for a pesticide that was weighted just as well as a license for water. And as shown by Councilmember Gonzalez very clearly, it's more important to have a water license than it is a pesticide license. It was very difficult for staff to work across the silos. Even if Sam, for example, was cutting the tree down, is the example that was given, if there was a water tech that was available, it was very difficult to get the internal organization to allow staff to even have assistance. They often waited for the supervisors to be out to offer assistance within each other. So I'm going to stand on the premise that I welcome TRWA to come in. I welcome additional testing for the maintenance techs that we have to provide redundancy. I welcome the fact that we need to place a heavier weight on water and wastewater licenses than we do on some of the other licenses that we have. I welcome the opportunity to discuss all of those issues, but what I struggle with is the staff, really of the staff that was let go, and that's a private conversation that we'll have offline. I'd be hard pressed to tell you how often they were actually testing and how often they were actually out in the field. I think the staff that you have right now is more than competent. I think the staff that you have right now is more than willing and has expressed those concerns that they are up to the challenge. They are working to get the maintenance techs trained up so that they can test, so that there is relief. But I can tell you the name that was thrown out today, we would lose more staff than we would gain.
And it may have been in there and I missed it. What's the time and cost or possibility to train existing staff to have that level C license?
They get a D first. The D test is $45. They get 3 shots, basically 3 times 45. So it would be an investment of $150 at most to get the current techs tested to Ds, which would allow the current C license, Daniel Pepin, to oversee those D licenses so they can actually do the test. The C license oversees the Ds. And basically what he's signing is that he agrees with the process, he agrees with the methods and things that are in place by the
So
city.
when you say overseas, if he currently is doing it 7 days a week, overseeing, does that mean that he can, let's say, oversee that from, is it something
Yes.
where it can happen on Saturday, Sunday, and he can sign off on it on Monday?
Correct.
Okay.
So
And then,
yes.
and $45, and how long does that take? How often is that test, and how hard is it?
The test is frequent. The test is administered frequently. There are other cities, for example, the city of Austin administers it to their staff on a regular basis. We've been offered space, but if the city of Austin needs the space, they kick us out and any other. It's much like the training that PD has. They open it up, but if they need it, they kick other folks out. We're ready. San Marcos and some of the other testing facilities are going to open in July, and we would like to have these folks trained up so that they could take the test and be successful.
So
But
how
we
many of
also-
our current staff, that statement you just made, how many of our current staff could sit for the test?
It would actually be the 2 maintenance techs, Carolyn and I, who could sit for the test.
So 4. So then we would go, if that, at some point, that would then mean we have 1 C, 4 Ds, and just to address the issue of 7 days a week, it would not be putting the burden on one person 7 days a week.
Correct. We also, even prior to COVID, as part of our emergency management plan back in December and January, we reached out to the city of Buda, to the city of Kyle, and other cities and also the city of Austin, and received favorable responses to mutual aid agreements to be able to assist us during whether it's an emergency, a disaster, an illness, or sickness. We've received positive responses, but again, a prior employee didn't take those to execution. Daniel has picked up the football and is running with that. There's no doubt in my mind, there's also a third-party possibility. There are companies out there who do this, who could do this, that we could engage in a time and material type contract. And then also the TRWA on its own. I mean, there are things that folks call range riders and helpers that will also be able to give us assistance and provide alternate individuals who are private companies or in employment for themselves that could be able to contract with us to provide that service as well.
Thank you. That answers my question. So based on what you did, which that's all new information for me, my preference tonight would be that we not move forward with the first portion of Melissa's motion, but that we approve the second part, the TRWA coming in, and that for the the additional individuals, I would like for the city and council to make a clear decision based on all three of those categories you just described. Getting as many D license on our current staff as possible in a better timeline of how quickly that would happen. Second, see if there's any interlocal or whatever the appropriate terminology is where we could, if on a need base, borrow from a neighboring city such as Westlake, Rollingwood, somebody that's a reasonable distance from us. And then 3, the outsource option. That I would like for us to understand that certainly before we jump back to hiring full-time employees. And with that, I'll start with the council members that have their hands up. Councilmember Reitz.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with you, Mayor, on your suggestions. I do think that it is important that we get some cross-training, get the maintenance techs and Carolyn and Sylvia the D license at minimum. My question is once you have a D license, or even if you do not have a D license, are you an operator in training? Can you do the testing being overseen by a licensee operator?
That's kind of I don't want to say it's a gray area, but most folks refer to the D as an operator in training. Technically, you can only remain a D for a certain period of time, and then you must test up to a C. We've kept D licenses longer, in some cases than we perhaps should have, but it is a natural progression into a C.
Okay, so then I would suggest that y'all move very quickly in obtaining the D licenses. And it sounds like that's like a 45-day process. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay, very good. And yes, I would be definitely in favor of having TRWA come in and give us an education. So, thank you.
Councilmember Rosengarten.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of the things that were discussed with the city administrator are the exact same things that I was waiting to discuss, and yourself. The one person that isn't in our meeting tonight is Daniel Pepin. So I have reached out to him, and he has answered those questions very much to what Sylvia mentioned. My question was, do you need help with the testing? He said, so far, I'm doing fine with doing the sampling every day, including weekends and holidays. The situation is not ideal, but is doable. This straight run started on 3/14/2020, right after our maintenance tech, Quentin, left. Quentin held a TCEQ D water license and alternated with me for doing water sampling. At this time, we have 2 existing maintenance technicians who will be testing for their TCEQ D water licenses soon, hopefully in July. If they pass their written D water exams and other licensing requirements, they will be granted their D water licenses. After receiving their licenses, the techs will then be able to alternate with me on the weekday and weekend sampling. My next question, should we hire a third party to help with the testing when you need time off? At this time, I am doing fine, and I'm not planning to take any whole days off in the near future, so this is probably not necessary. If neither of our 2 existing maintenance techs are able to obtain their D water licenses in the near future, the sampling every weekend scenario could become more difficult over the long run. Both Carolyn and Sylvia have expressed interest in getting TCEQ D water licenses and will be eligible to conduct routine water system sampling when they get their D licenses and complete specific training on these tasks. Third question, should we work with another city with testing when you need time off? Establishing interlocal agreements with neighboring cities for emergency services would be a good move. Prior to COVID-19, we had open communications with Kyle, Buda, and Austin in that regard, and will be pursuing these potential agreements more actively again. Now that we are coming back out of COVID-19 response operating mode, these interlocal agreements would probably be more emergency-based and not so much for routine time off. For non-emergency time off, I am expecting that some of our existing staff will get licensed soon and be able to fill in for me when the next time is needed. So that is Mr. Daniel Pepin himself, our water licensed B, Class B. Also, I have 2 calls in to Mr. Larry Bell early this morning, and he has yet been able to return my call. So I have questions into him. One of those questions is, could an unlicensed person do this water testing with the fact that they have a supervised, licensed boss that could do the report? And somebody hit on that already. So thank you. Those are all information that we needed.
Thank you. Councilmember Ellett?
Hello, Madam Mayor?
Yes. Yes, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to echo what you said, what Councilmember Reed said and Councilmember Rosengarten said. I think we should go ahead and try and get as many of our folks certified as D licensed as possible. I think we should look at working with other cities. Daniel Pepin said that himself. And I don't think now is the time to consider bringing people back at all. We still have Budget and Finance Committee putting budgets together based on expectations of what we see in the revenue. We don't know what the revenue is going to look like right now. No one does. And I want to make a comment about morale, seeing as that came up. There was a young man working for the city, came the other week, I think late last week, to read the meter. He was just very positive, anxious to learn more about water in the, what he needs to do to get to the next level. So I would say morale is great, based on 2 or 3 people I've talked to. And my hat is off to you, Sylvia. You've managed through this issue very, very well. You've preserved the morale. You've taken care of the city's needs and requirements. And we're going through this process without expending money where we shouldn't expend money. So I think the whole idea of getting cross-trained is very critical. And I think we should work on that. And before we have any conversation whatsoever about bringing people back or adding people. So that's what I stand.
Councilmembers, do we have any additional comments or questions? And we do still have an active, we have a motion on the floor, which is the motion that Councilmember Gonzalez made, which is to hire an employee as soon as possible that holds a Tech C license or higher, and then to welcome the TRWA to come in. Do we have any citizen comment? Councilmembers, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. And Sylvia, if you would read the vote back.
I'm just waiting on Councilmember Ellett. Councilmember Ellett, if you would submit your vote through the chat.
Yeah, I lost this. I lost the connection earlier. What is it we're voting on? Sorry, I lost it for about 3 minutes there.
Councilmember Gonzalez's original motion on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, the vote is as okay. Councilmember Rosengarten, nay. Councilmember Reeds, nay. Councilmember Medicus, yes. Councilmember Gonzalez, yes. Councilmember Ellett, nay.
Motion does not pass. Councilmember Rosengarten. Councilmember Ellett, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Rosengarten, did you have a question?
What I was going to say is if somebody wants to make a motion that TRWA come and give a presentation, that's fine. Anything else, I would not vote yes on. Yep. I so move.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Councilmember Reitz?
I second.
Do we have any additional discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. And those opposed say nay. Sylvia, if you would please read the vote back.
Councilmember Gonzalez is trying to speak, but she can't get through.
Okay, well, I will address her after you read the vote back. We've already called for the vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez, if you would submit your vote.
And Sylvia, would you repeat the vote back? Because it may be that somebody wasn't clear on what the motion was.
The motion was to invite TWRA to give a presentation to the city council.
And could you read the votes back?
Councilmember Ellett, yes. Councilmember Medicus, yes. Councilmember Rosengarten, yes. Councilmember Reitz, yes. Councilmember Gonzalez has a question.
Councilmember Gonzalez, we're in the middle of the vote. What's your question?
Well, are we voting on having them come, or are they just going to do a presentation? Because it's a circuit rider thing where they come, they do the analysis. Are we just having them do a presentation?
The motion is just for a presentation.
All right.
Thank you. What is Councilmember Gonzalez's vote, Sylvia?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Councilmembers, we are at 9:57. If I thought we could get through any of these even relatively quickly, I don't think either of our final items tonight are short items, but I will allow the sponsor for item 13 to speak before we. Councilmember Gonzalez, do you agree that it would be best to bump your item 13 to the next meeting? Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes, it's not time sensitive.
Okay, so we will bump item 13 to the next meeting, and same thing for item 14, it'll bump to the next meeting. And I don't know that we need a motion for that because we're at 9:58 and our meeting has to stop at 10.
Oh, Mayor,
yes,
clarification,
yes.
It was 4 people we had, not 3.
Excuse me?
With a C license. It was 4 people that we had with a C license, not 3.
Councilmember Medicus?
Oh, I just wanted to make a correction. Believe the motion that we just voted on that was read, the letters were transposed, so I wanted to make sure they were correct. The acronym.
Oh,
It's TR, not TW, I think.
Yes, Texas Rural Water Association.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just a minor thing, but.
It's important. It could be something else.
Councilmember Reitz?
Oh, I was going to make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. And we have a second from Councilmember Gonzalez. All those in favor, please indicate your vote. And Sylvia, if you would please read the votes back.
Councilmember Gonzalez, yes. Councilmember Reitz, yes. Councilmember Medicus, yes. Councilmember Rosengarten, yes. Councilmember Ellett, yes.
Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned at 9:59. Thank you.